Hello, everyone. Welcome to ProAV Day, our final day of launch week 10. I know you guys are really sad. I
I'm
am
really sad.
too.
It went by so
It
fast.
did go by really fast. But yeah, this is our last day. We like to save ProAV Day for the last day because this is kind of like the most general and in a lot of ways the hardest day to like put for because almost everything falls under ProAV. So it's really hard to be like, what's going on in this entire huge area of the industry right now. So this we always save the hardest for the last day and the one that is probably most relevant to all of you out there. So, yeah, this is going to be a good day. We got some good stuff ready for you
Yeah.
guys.
I want to give a quick thank you to our sponsors for today, TV1, Matrox Video, Crestron, and Audio Technica. I'm excited to hear from all of them today, and we could not do Launch Week X without them. Launch Week
Yep.
10. I
Yep.
can't help myself.
No, this is like the iPhone thing where
Yeah.
where the 10 came out and everyone kept calling it the iPhone X. Like this is the same thing
I
as
think
that.
I'm the only one on our team that routinely says Launch Week X.
And Gary said it was me who does it.
No, it's me, 100%.
And yes. Yes, it's not. I was like I'm innocent.
You are. I also want to give a quick thank you to our partners. They
Mhm.
helped us put the week together in terms of providing speakers, marketing support, all of that. So thank you to Avixa, CDA Edge, Digital Signage Federation, HETMA, Illinois Digital Educators Alliance, Sustainability in AV or SAVE, and Wave It.
Exactly. And for those of you who may just be joining, like if this is your first time ever joining launch, or if this is your first time this week joining a day, hi, welcome. I'll tell you a little bit about our platform. So you're obviously seeing and hearing me and Megan talk, hopefully. So, the hardest part's already done. But to the right of where you see us, that is the Q&A. That is where we would like you to put your questions if you have any that you would like us to ask any of our panelists today, or if you have questions for any of those sponsors, those can go there as well. But yes, please make sure to utilize that. Megan and I both love when the audience really participates in the panels that we put together. So please make sure to utilize that. Below us, these are poll questions. So these are going to be how we are gauging how interested and participatory you guys are in all that we do. And also, we are giving you 2.5 CTSRUs for today. And that is if you are here, you are paying attention, you are a part of this full day. So please make sure you are participating in those polls. We're refreshing them every few minutes. So just make sure to keep an eye on that. We will remind you guys to just, continue filling those out if you're a part of today. Up below that is our networking chat. Feel free to talk to the other AV tweeps in the chat. You can message everyone who is online today. You can direct message people. We really built this platform to be very interactive, and we wanted you guys to form relationships with us as well as each other. So feel free to utilize that. Continuing down, if you needed to double check at what point any sessions begin or end today, if you need to step away for a few minutes or something, you can do that there, just as a reminder of everything that we have going on today. And then as you keep scrolling, you see all of our lovely sponsors and partners. And then finally, you see me, Megan, Gary, and you see all of the panelists and the speakers who are going to be part of today. If you click on any of their names, it takes you to their LinkedIn pages so you can connect with them. So, yeah.
Awesome. I just have a few things to add. I know Steph mentioned it's CTS, CTSD, or CTSI are used. You have to be attending live and answering poll questions so we know you're paying attention. We will email the certificate to you within 10 business days, so within 2 weeks, and it will go to your email that you registered for the launch platform with. That's the key part because that's our number one question that we get
Mm-hmm.
asked after it's getting
Yep.
sent to the wrong email. And if you fill out the poll today, you are being entered into a drawing to win an Amazon gift card, which is always exciting.
Always exciting. All right. Well, we did want to bring up, we actually had breaking news in the
Yeah.
Pro AV world today. Acuity actually purchased QSC, which is crazy. We have a story about that on Launch Code as well as Rave Pub, so you can go and read that full story for how much they purchased them for. I think it was like, what
It
was
was
it, Megan?
1.2 billion.
1.25 billion or something. But we actually also have a video from the QSC and Acuity teams that we are going to roll for you guys really quick.
Today, we welcome QSC to Acuity. Our acquisition of QSC expands our Intelligent Spaces group and executes on our vision of making spaces smarter, safer, and greener with disruptive technologies that leverage data interoperability. With me today are Joe Pham, Chairman and CEO of QSC, Peter Hahn, our President of Intelligent Spaces, and Karen Holcomb, our Chief Financial Officer. We believe that the data generated in a build space, from managing a build space, from what happens in a build space, and from who is in a build space, can come together in new and unique ways to make meaningful differences for the occupants. QSC's technology solution is the QSys platform, which is a fantastic addition to Spaces as we pursue the vision, because it expands our addressable market into audio, video, and control. QSys is disruptive technology in a strategically adjacent industry that will enable us to drive end-user satisfaction through data interoperability between managing a built space and what happens in a built space. And the company has an attractive financial profile that will be accretive to our 2025 full-year adjusted diluted earnings per share. I'm excited that Joe Pham, Chairman and CEO of QSC, can join us here today. Joe?
Neil, it's really great to be here. Thanks so much. We are really excited to be joining a company that not only aligns with our long-term mission, but also one that so closely shares our core values. So let me tell you a little bit about QSC. We began in the professional audio industry, but we've always evolved as a company and have since transformed ourselves into a disruptor in the cloud-managed audio, video, and controls space. Our platform and intelligent automation have redefined what is possible in collaboration, commercial AV, and entertainment. We seamlessly bridge remote and in-person participation, and we deliver dynamic and engaging experiences that captivate and inspire. And so to our valued customers and partners, we will continue to lead our business with the same commitment to excellence. Our name, our brands, and our locations will remain unchanged. And Neil, we share Acuity's vision of harnessing data to transform spaces, and we're really excited to work with you and the rest of the team to bring that vision to life.
Thanks, Joe. QSC is a dynamic leader that uses data to drive end-user experiences. It has been that focus on data that led to our teams finding each other. Peter, can you talk a little bit more about how our companies came together?
Absolutely. Thanks, Neil. We met QSC through our respective technology partner programs, where our technology and engineering teams have developed a joint integration between Distech and QSys with shared data and control. This set Space's core franchise in BMS controls and QSC's in AV controls started working together on the edge and moving towards the cloud. So we got great insight into what's possible by bringing together our two teams. As you said, Neil, Spaces has focused so far on how a building operates, its heating, cooling, and ventilation systems, its refrigeration and lighting counterparts, and the software that powers all that. The addition of QSC expands that focus to what occupants do inside their spaces. Imagine this. You walk into a room and the space intelligently adjusts to offer you a tailored experience. The room has data that can predict how many people will likely be in attendance and can cool the room in advance for optimum comfort. And then once the meeting starts, the microphones and cameras transition seamlessly between speakers for both in-person and virtual attendees. Also imagine how the lighting levels optimize for a change in visuals and shades lower to reduce glare. Or if a meeting is canceled, the system can revert back to its unoccupied settings to save energy and lower costs. This vision becomes real as our product, engineering, and go-to-market teams bring it together for customers and the systems integrators who serve them. Today's announcement highlights that Acuity is thinking about spaces differently and using data to maximize occupant experience and transform those spaces.
Thanks, Peter. It's exciting to be that much closer to realizing this vision. Karen, this transaction is consistent both with our capital allocation priorities and our financial profile.
That's right, Neil. We are buying QSC for a purchase price of $1.215 billion, and we expect to realize approximately $100 million in present value of tax benefits, which brings the net purchase price to $1.1 billion. The net purchase price is about 14 times QSC's estimated EBITDA for the year ended August 31st, 2024. We expect it to grow at a similar rate to our existing ISG business, and we expect the acquisition to be accretive to our AYI 2025 adjusted diluted earnings per share. This transaction demonstrates our financial capacity. We are financing the acquisition with $600 million of additional debt and the remainder with cash on hand. With continued strong cash flow, we could repay this debt by the end of next fiscal year if we choose, and we still have ample liquidity to execute on all of our capital allocation priorities. We're currently going through normal regulatory approvals, and we expect the transaction to close in our second quarter of fiscal 2025. So Neil, for all the strategic reasons that you, Joe, and Peter have described, and the performance it will contribute, I'm excited to welcome the QSC team to Acuity.
Karen, thanks, and I agree. This is an exciting day for both Acuity and QSC. This is a great example of our ability to continue to grow our Spaces group into a larger and strategically more important part of our company. We're acquiring a disruptive company in an adjacent space that executes our vision of data interoperability. So to Joe and all of the team at QSC, welcome. I'm confident that you will thrive as part of Acuity. We're excited about what we can achieve together as we work to make spaces smarter, safer, and greener.
Okay.
Well, that was interesting, and it was nice to hear straight from them what's going on.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad that they included a video in the press release that they sent out this morning. And just to clarify, yeah, it was 1.215 billion. I was off by the 1.5. So, yes, and they got. We were talking backstage about how Acuity actually received an $11 million tax benefit for purchasing
100 million.
Yeah, I can't look at numbers today. I don't know
Yeah.
what's wrong with me.
Well, let's be honest. We don't know what 100 million feels like.
No, I certainly don't, and probably will not in my lifetime. So I'm being
No.
so honest.
I just saw a video on TikTok the other day of like comparing like how much things cost like for Taylor Swift.
Yeah,
And like compared, and it was like a car cost her like a couple bucks.
yeah, like
you know.
$5.
Yeah. And like a
Wow.
nice meal at like a fancy steakhouse was like 73 cents.
That like hurts my feelings to think.
Well, before we get started for today, we're planning ahead, man. We are ready for launch week 11. It's going to be March 24th through 27th. So make sure you save the date, March 24th through the 27th. And you can register right now so you don't have to remember
quick and
to go
easy.
back and get it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
super easy. Save your spot, save the date.
Just
if
need
you are
your name and email.
That's all we need.
Are we
It's very
dropping the
easy.
link in the chat for that?
Yes.
Yeah. So the link is in the chat for that.
So yeah, we hope you guys come. If you have enjoyed this week of content, we try to really frame everything that we do about like whatever's going on in the industry. So we're excited. We're looking forward to the end of March to see, what's changed between now and then. And yeah, we're really, really excited to continue putting together good stuff for y'all.
Yeah,
So please
I think
come.
these weeks are so fun. I think just as fun for us as they are for everybody else. Maybe even more fun.
Maybe even more fun, probably.
So let's get into today's stuff. You interviewed TV One about their Calico Pro video processor. We saw it at InfoComm, but you got an exclusive scoop. So let's roll that clip.
Sounds good.
All right, everyone, for our next session here at Launch Week 10, I am pleased to be joined by Mark Tervena of TV One. First of all, Mark, how are you?
I am really good. I'm looking forward. We've been working really hard on releasing Calico Pro, And the good news is I've got a holiday booked for 30 days time. So I'm building up to that. But no, doing really well. Thanks for asking.
That's awesome. Yeah. So we're talking about the Calico Pro, which we talked about. I first saw probably at ISC 2022, but this is officially shipping now. This is officially launched. So that's exciting. First of all, congratulations.
Yeah, and it's been a huge effort by the whole team. So, we're an FPGA kind of based outfit, and it's a real struggle to fit all the code on. So that's kind of part of the delay. Also part of it, I remember last time I talked to Gary, we don't remember it, but the COVID times, we spent all our R&D effort redesigning chip for new chips as they became available. But we're here though, and it's like super exciting. I've been working to this for the last 2 years.
Yeah, like this huge thing that you've been like working toward has finally come to fruition. It must feel pretty good.
And the first one is out in the wild. I can't tell you where it is.
That's okay.
But it's like a big kind of US educational establishment, and hopefully within a day or two you'll see the press release. We're super excited.
That's awesome. So obviously this is for DV LED, and so answer me this: what type of DV LED applications is Calico Pro used for? What are the market trends here?
Yeah, so we've been seeing for a long time that DV LED has been growing, and it's kind of got to the point now it's kind of at the right price point. You can actually move away from displays and go to DV LED. It's interesting though. It's interesting because we're still seeing displays. So for things like if you follow like the major broadcast websites in North America, they do a lot with displays. So they're doing like 100-inch displays. So this does all of it. So this just doesn't do DV LED. It does edge blend projection and displays, so we can account for the bezels and stuff. But predominantly now we're seeing LED, and it's because it's kind of got to a price point where you can make that decision. So that's the first thing that we're seeing. Some of these solutions are getting really complex though, and that's kind of where we see this kind of filling in behind. I'm talking stuff like like a live event where you've got kind of lots, three or four LED screens, and you're trying to put windowing on it. I'm talking about control rooms where you might be getting in, I hope it's the right word, multiplex cameras, like a grid of cameras. What do you do with it? With Calico, what you can do is you can cut that part, put it everywhere. Also seeing similar things for education where they want to take web assets, put it on a wall. Broadcast has always been strong for us. That continues to be as well. And part of that, this is a low latency box, so it's like one frame from end to end. I think that's physics. It has to be. And I'm itching not to turn this, but if I did turn it around, it does turn. It has got like a gen lock connector on the back, but we call it frame lock. So for broadcast applications, we can do that. So yeah, the industry is really interesting at the minute. And this is interesting at Infocom. The biggest sort of group of clients we had visit us was LED manufacturers. And every LED manufacturer came and saw us and go, hey, kind of what you're doing. And kind of a bit later, I think we've got a clip of what we did at Infocom, and that will kind of, hopefully people on this session will kind of start thinking about, hey, is that possible? And then this is where Calico fits in, of course.
Very cool. So how would you describe, you talked about the launch being really exciting because it's this thing that you've been working toward for so long, and now it's finally out and shipping. So second of all, how's that going?
So it's going, the launch is going really well. I mean, the good thing with having all that time is we're able to build up excitement to it. So that's kind of cool. And it's like, it's out in the wild. It's been to Integrate in Australia. It's just been to Infocom India. And this wasn't with a TV1 minder. I just imagine a TV1 minder now. But this was we sent the unit out to our partners, and they got up and running. At the moment in Scandinavia, it's been at the show. So it's out there now and it's being used. So it is kind of super exciting. And some of the things that make it exciting is the power. So, if when you talk about video processors, you talk about how many inputs and outputs and how many layers and all that sort of stuff. This essentially has got hundreds of asset layers. So that could be like a video layer. It could be a label. It could be a keyed logo. It could be a transition. It could be a key layer. And we can literally do hundreds of that. So we've got more more of that than you'll ever need, and it just takes that problem away. Also, in the core of this, it's processing everything. It depends what you've got the canvas set to, but it's processing 4K, 4K raster at 444 color space. So whatever you put into this, and it's kind of the tradition of TV1, we kind of up down convert. So if you put in 720p, our scaling engine on the FPGA would scale that up to 4K. The quality is exquisite as well. And like I said already, the latency is unnoticeable. It's one frame, which is like less than a blink of an eye, isn't it?
Yeah.
So on top of that, we've kind of, when we will talk about cropping, we'll talk about output mapping in a minute. We've also added a labeling engine, which is something we've always wanted. So we've got a really interesting labeling engine that you can either type free text in, or you can link it to a source so it changes, or you can have image still labels, and you can also have video source labels as well. And then when you imagine, like 200 plus layers of that, what you can do with it, and all our outputs are completely free, in terms of what they are. So, some manufacturers that have, this is our multi-viewer output, this is our output for the preview program. We don't have that. All of our outputs, you configure exactly as you want them. So it kind of gives you complete design freedom. That's one of the things I'm trying to, in this session, trying to get across is this Calico. It will find as many uses as the number of people who want to use it. And that's what's super exciting, especially for me when I get, customer queries and they come to me, hey, Mark, can you do this? And I have to scratch my brain and we work out a way of doing it, because the tool set is so rich that we could, everything we've had so far, we've been able to do. And like I said, LED manufacturers are there going, this is interesting, because for them, it allows them potentially to use less LED process boxes and do more expansive LED. And, I know you've been on your travels recently, and if you saw like video installations when you're out, you don't want to see a 2x2 wall or 3x3 wall anymore. You want to see something that's really exquisite and really, really kind of visually attractive, and that's what this enables you to do.
Yeah. So you talked about input cropping really briefly, so I'm going to ask you about that now. So at InfoComm, you were kind of doing a demo showing how you used input cropping of composite sources to create this expansive content. Why is that cool? Why does that matter?
Yeah, it is really cool. And there's a thing that we talk about in media server land. So, TV1, one of our brands is Green Hippo, and we talk about the production arts, which is from creation through to display. And that we're trying to attract further back down that production arch to the designer. What we did at InfoComm is I drew out for our amazing designer the wall, which was kind of a mixture of like a 21 by 9 kind of area, 2 pillars, two ribbons, and then I think we had a square panel as well. So this is together. This is 4K in terms of pixels. Can you visualize that content for me? So he drew in the space, create the content on top of it, and then there's some sort of Adobe wizardry. Don't ask me how to do it, but he turned that into a single 4K raster with all that content mapped within the 4K raster. And what we did then is we manually cut it apart. So in PowerPoint, and you have the cropping tool. I've got one of these on here, and within the next release, we'll have the ability to actually plot in a map. So you'll be able to do something akin to like a spreadsheet, plot in the pixels and just push go. And why that is really cool. So imagine if you had your own exhibition center. I can imagine what it'd be like to have screens everywhere, wouldn't it? But the screens are always going to be in the same place, aren't they? So and you want to go to the person who's coming in to hire that space, and you say, provide me my content like this. Here's the map. They give that to their content designers, create the map. They can do all their pre-visualization, all of that stuff, and then give you it. And you just like pull down the map from your list, poof, and it's up there. The second reason I think it's cool is imagine content's expensive, isn't it? So do you imagine if you were trying to do something like with your signage in your lobby, and you wanted to take bits off your website? People spend a fortune on the content of their websites, but they won't spend the money like on regular content often.
Right.
So you can take parts of that and crop it apart and then reposition it on that wall. Maybe, this thing's got a media store, so you could have media, corporate style background. You could pop that, the content on top. Then you could add labels on top of that, and then maybe add a keyed logo over the top to brand it. And suddenly you've got a really attractive piece of content that's really quick and easy to put up. So input cropping sounds like a very kind of simple thing to talk about,
Yeah.
but as soon as we start playing it, I mean, that's why Infocom's like a playground for us.
Yeah.
What could we do? And we came up with this idea and then followed it through the whole production arch, really, from the in-house creatives to the engineers at the other end delivering it on site. And I'll tell you something about that implementation. So what you can't see unless you were there, they're actually two different pixel pitches which we managed across. That's cool. But and it was just really simple to do. We had the engineers in from the LED company in at midnight. They go, this is going to take us hours, and we literally input our spreadsheet, and it just went.
Did it in seconds.
So quick, reduced hardware, easier to do, less, and this goes all the way down to the green story as well, doesn't it? You're going to put less stuff in landfill at the end. I'm really passionate about the green story, so you have to tell me when to stop. This is really high quality manufacture. We make it in the UK. We do sub assembly in North America. It's high quality. We've been lead free for ages, and I'm really passionate about this because you see racks and racks of boring black boxes, and they've got a short lifetime. I've turned the camera around, but my first rack I ever built here is just behind here, and
cool.
The gear is 12 years old, still works.
Nice.
Still works. I've occasionally upgrade it, put a new module in, so you don't have to, and it's important for our future and our kids' future that we have a sustainable model in AV for sure.
Yeah. So the other thing you briefly touched on was that the Calico Pro manages outputs for DV-LED really efficiently. So why is that important, particularly to system integrators?
Yeah, and it's kind of a concept to get your head around. And I think, if you give me a chance, I'll tell you how to reach out to us to sign up for a demo, because once you see it, you'll get it. The concept's really interesting. So we essentially package up the outputs. So what I do is I take a 4K raster of pixels, and then I chop it into sections. Do you remember that game as a kid at Christmas you used to get where the tiles used to move around?
Yes.
You have that in the States. Brilliant. So it's a bit like that. So you don't have to be like have the brain the size of a planet. You just literally in this tool type in all your resolutions of your LEDs, and then you move the tiles around till they fit within the raster. And at the moment, this goes up to 4K 60. It's HDMI 2.0 to start with. We are working on a 2.1 module for 8K. That is coming. So at the moment, within that 4K raster, and then once you've got that on in Calico Studio, which is our design software, what it does is it gives you those bits. We then actually manipulate it as bits. So these are quarters of a wall. And you might not be able to see, but down here, this is the output. So the bottom where it says output mapper, that's a single output out of the unit. And because I've mapped it in the right place in here, it's all correct. This is where I was saying a moment ago, the LED manufacturers are like, wow, that saves me time. That's easy to do. So essentially, I've done 3 LED walls worth of content with one sender box, and it's visually correct. And I can put material over one screen, put it over, pull them across as well. So back to the visual attractiveness as well. So it saves much of the time. It saves cabling complexity. And every time we add something in the system, you have to add a control node to it, and there's all this hidden cost. So we take all that away. And what's more, the studio, the software Calico Studio, it's on our website, tv1.com. Just go to the Calico Pro page. You can download it, design your own walls, and pre-visualize them to your customers. So we've got an offline mode on this, and it's got content in there you can cut up and you can work with. So you can pre-visualize it early and get your clients excited, and do something visually exciting. Don't just do like I say, the old days display was a 3x3. Don't just do boring chunks. Don't waste pixels. If you haven't got a full raster, a lot of LED processors are effectively throwing away pixels. Don't do that. Make the most of every pixel. Make it visually attractive. Make people want to stand there and go, wow. I know when I go out with my kids, most stuff that they get bored with. And if I take them somewhere exciting, I'm trying to think. I went to Singapore with them years ago. There's a huge wall up the side of a building they're excited about. And then in the airport, there's an interactive facility. and they stood there and watched it because it was visually attractive. It was beyond the norm, and that's what we're powering with Calico Pro.
Yeah.
It's going to be super exciting.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of no excuse to be boring with the content that you're putting out anymore, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Mark. So my last question for you already kind of answered it, but what's the best way for people to reach out to you? What's the best way for people to get a demo?
Yeah, so just go to our website, tv1.com, and there's bars along the top. So first one go to is support, download Calico Studio. I could give you 5 minutes tuition, you'd be up and using it. So that's the first thing. And then there's also on the top bar, there's a couple of places you can get help. There's a tool for you to give us what you want out of a video wall, and one of our experts will design the wall for you and come back to you. You can also request a demo as well. This room's multifunction, so I have in-person training, but it's also set up as a remote demo room. So all of my sales colleagues are able to do remote demos for you, or we can bring a unit out to you. So all of my colleagues now have got their demo units. Could you imagine how excited they're all to get the box arrived in by DHL or whatever it is? And so they're out there now actively doing demos as well. So just please reach out to us. If there's anything I talked about today sounds that sounds kind of interesting, I'd like to know more, just reach out to us. Bottom line, my name's fairly unusual. It's Trevino. Just look me on LinkedIn. Just send me a message. I'm personally happy to be contacted anyway. That's all. This has been fun though.
Yeah, this has been awesome. It's been good catching up with you, Mark.
Yeah, excellent. And I guess I don't know what you're up to now, but we're counting down to ISE next year. So
yeah, us
so
too.
That's overbooked already, isn't it? I heard it's 30% bigger than last year.
Yep. And I'm looking forward to seeing you, and I'm looking forward to seeing the Calico Pro there.
Yeah, the demo is going to be amazing. I won't tell you what it's going to be, but it's going to be like back to. Do you remember the windmill days we did? Probably not. But look up the windmill on TV1 windmill on YouTube. It's going to be something akin to that. It's going to be mind-blowing.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. I'm so excited.
That's
awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate you joining me today.
Hey, everyone. I'm excited to be on launch. It's been a while since I've done my own session and led a session, and I can almost guarantee you this is going to be the best session I've ever done. And that's saying a lot, but I really believe it is going to be. And I'll tell you why, because AV over IP is hot right now. Everybody who's doing significant facility-wide design of AV systems is using AV over IP. And there are a bunch of different platforms out there. There are, obviously Crestron is the leader right now in AV over IP with the NVX system. You've got Extron with the NAV system. You've got IPMX as an adopted standard out there. You've got SDVOE, which is 10 gig AV over IP. We've got 1 gig, we got 10 gig, we got 25 gig, we got uncompressed AV over IP and broadcast applications. And no two better companies to join this session right now than the two guys I'm about to bring on right now. Here they are, Sam and Joel from Crestron and from Matrox. I mean, you guys are the two biggies in this space when it comes to AV over IP. And it's interesting to have you both on, and I really appreciate you both being part of this session. And I expect the audience to interact with this session. We want to know what you think and sort of where you are in AV over IP. But first, Sam, introduce yourself.
It's great to be with you, Gary, and nice to be with you, Joel. I'm Samuel Racine. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Matrox, and I'm also the Chairman of the ProAV Working Group at AIMS.
Yeah, and AIMS Alliance, actually we'll come back to this, but AIMS Alliance is the alliance that created the IPMX standard. And Joel, introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks, Gary, and yeah, good to be here with you and Sam. I am the Director of Product Marketing for Crestron in the commercial line. Looking after all of our AV over IP products, MVS, control systems, all that kind of stuff from a product marketing standpoint.
I apologize for coughing on top of you. I'm going to have to get something to drink here. Love coconut water. All right, Sam. AIMS Alliance was created, about 5 years ago, something like that? It was designed to take the SMTPE, ST2110, which is the uncompressed AV over IP standard for sending video across the network for broadcast applications. And I think you guys were charged with bringing it into ProAV, or were you charged with bringing the bandwidth down, or what was the original objective of AIMS, and where are we with IPMX right now?
Okay, so there's a lot of organizations involved in SMPTE 2110. The specifications were originally developed in the Video Services Forum. The earlier versions of 2110 were known as TR03 in the VSF, but this is a group of engineers talking with engineers from many companies. And what AIMS was created for was to be a public-facing entity, and it's a two-way communication street. So it was to educate the market on what was going on in the VSF, and it was also to get feedback from the market about what needed to be prioritized and in what order things should be done. So the TR03 was essentially the market strategy in broadcast to migrate SDI to an IP workflow, and so they had to preserve all of the characteristics of SDI, but take all of the advantages of IP, roll them into one solution. When TR03 was introduced, it was also worked on by the SMPTE organization that went through all of the specifications, put them in a language that could be standardized, and this eventually became known as SMPTE ST 2110. So there's, these three organizations collaborated on the media and transport, and then after that, a different organization called AMWA was developing something to help with device discovery and registration on systems to make it easier to connect different product types from different brands. So the network media open specification was developed in AMWA. So today it's very, very common and very popular for people to use 2110 equipment with NMOS as the control plane. And then the group that built TR03, which essentially became 2110, basically just continued the work. It was all along planned to start with SDI and then to continue to HDMI and USB and other things. So TR10 is the new suite that was released by the VSF, and that's what is popularly known as IPMX. So IPMX sort of builds on everything that came before it.
Okay, so and if you want to learn more about IPMX, you can go to ipmx.io, which will give you the specification and tell you the philosophy. And really, and I want to kind of focus on just that going forward with regard to you, Sam. It's a 1 gig currently 1 gig AV over IP ecosystem, or you could even call it a standard. We'll come back to that in just a second. But my first question is to Joel, because I literally yesterday wrote up a story. And before we talk about the future of AV over IP, I want to talk about where we are now. Just yesterday, I wrote up a story about Crestron launching the new DM NVX 384, which basically adds USB-C. It's your first foray into USB-C into the NVX system. And it's really more than a transmitter receiver. It's more of a transcoder, but really it's a 4x1 switcher built into a transcoder, which means it'll do transmission or receiving, that handles USB-C and HDMI. It seems like you trying to build a system in one kind of approach with this product, Joel. And I'd like for you to kind of respond to that specifically on the product, but also obviously all of our viewers on here would love to get an update on NVX, because in the last 4 years, a lot has happened with NVX. So what do you say?
Yeah, happy to. We had a launch yesterday. We've actually had a week of what we called AV over IP week, which has kept us busy with webinars, but I hear you guys have been busy with webinars as well this week. So we've been putting stuff out into the market. But this week has been centered around launching that 384 product into the market. So for NVX, we have obviously been releasing hardware as we go along the line. It's been in the market for coming on to 10 years now or so, a little bit less than 10 years. And we're very excited by adding more and more products to that lineup, 384 being the latest. But we've always made NVX to be platforms were released that we can add features to later on with firmware and software updates. 384 is no different in that sense. So we packed a lot of I/O into that new device. The really three things we focused on was bringing USB-C connectivity to it, having that multi-input switching, so it's now that 4x1 switcher on the front end, and then bringing in support for higher resolutions, which lets us do wider aspect ratios, to do 32:9 and 21:9 aspect ratios were the three important parts of that product. But there's a heap of updates coming to that as well.
Actually, you also had an AES 67 audio too in that release as well, if I remember correctly. Did you not?
NVX supports AES 67 audio. The 384, so do the 360 and prior devices all have AES 67 as well. So yeah, that's our, we have our DMN-AX audio streams we support with that. The underlying protocol of that is AES 67, so interop with lots of other devices in the market as well.
Are all the NVX, I mean, this is a question I just got to ask, and we can get over this afterwards, but are all the NVX products shipping now? Are you back to regular production? And if somebody's designing systems with it now, they're not going to have any delivery issues or anything?
Yep, everything is shipping. That is definitely a thing of the past, which is nice.
I mean, everyone had issues with that, but of course, I think it hit you guys a little harder than most of the companies in the industry. Sam, it's interesting. I've been working with your organization since the beginning. When it became known as IPMX, so probably 4 or 5 years ago, I remember presenting at a session that y'all were doing, like an open conference. I think it was the first one you ever did. And one of the questions that your predecessor asked me to address in that session, at the time he was the head of the IPMX, and unfortunately passed away since. But he said, I want you to make the statement because you believe it. One of the questions that was asked me is what was my opinion on IPMX, which is what you use in Matrox uses in your Convert IP product line. You have a whole line of IPMX transmitters and receivers, AV over IP products. The question was asked, like, do I believe that IPMX would become a standard? And I answered the question sort of two ways. I said, yes, I believe it'll be adopted as a standard because that's really, you've got this working group that's moving that direction. Will it become the standard of AV over IP? My response was that it will as soon as Crestron, AMX, or Extron adopt IPMX, put IPMX through their systems. So I guess I'd kind of like to know where you think IPMX sits right now, because obviously Matrox has made a big investment in it. You were really the first company with a full line of products using IPMX. But now we have, I don't know, at least 5 or 6 other brands that have added IPMX as part of their offerings, and another 20 or 30, according to the Alliance, that are coming soon. I'd love for you to kind of now, 5 years later, respond to the question that was asked of me and give me an update on where we are with regard to that.
Well, we've learned so much by working on a standard in a much bigger set of markets. 2110 began in broadcast, but 2110 impacted a lot of things. So in medical, it was picked up by the medical community, and DICOM RTV is based on SMPTE 2110 to address medical workflows. In the defense sector, all of the applications that were using synchronized cameras and things like that, they have models that are based on SDI with sync. They are migrating to SMPTE 2110. So, but IPMX added a host of functionality that starts to creep into the corporate AV space, the education space, the mainstream event space, and if there's one thing that we've learned by working on the standards, is that there's really 3 fundamental asset classes in the market that are on different paths. If you look at broadcast production equipment or media production equipment, that's certain grade and above, most of the equipment is migrating from baseband like HDMI and SDI to things like SMPTE 2110 or NDI. In the AV signal routing space, there's a lot of things. There's, you mentioned some of the big brands that have their own flagship implementations. There's a few chip companies that are offering a chip-based solution like ASpeed and Semtech, which promotes the SDVOE protocol. There's Audinate, which promotes Dante for both audio, and now they also have Dante AV for audio and video. And all of these things actually have different aspects of utility and functionality that each provides some usefulness. And the third asset bucket that is incredibly important is the PC IT asset base. The corporate communications they run on computers that run Zoom and Teams. And for example, Crestron just made a big splash last week of how much interconnectivity there is between the NVX appliances and what you can now do with PCs with their stuff. So another critical junction, but the protocols used are different for PCs as well. There's a lot of streams that are based on the codecs available in mainstream compute processing. So what's in your cell phone, what's in your tablet, what's on the CPU of your laptop with hardware acceleration, those codec blocks that have acceleration are different than the two previous categories. So you have this inconsistent migration from baseband to IP from all those three asset classes, and it poses a new problem. Because before, we were able to connect these three asset classes to each other very easily. You can connect AV equipment to HDMI capture cards on a PC, or inputs on a media production switcher. In the absolute worst case, there were small frictionless dongles in the process. Like you can convert from something to HDMI or HDMI to something else really easily. The converters were cheap, reliable, no skills required. So there really was no problem bridging all of these assets. Now, with people wanting to remain in IP across those asset classes, that's where the standards come in. The standards are attempting to create enough media profiles. So IPMX, for example, supports uncompressed. So you can, have very, very high bandwidth IPMX if the application suitably requires it. IPMX supports several mezzanine codecs, including JPEG XS, and it makes provisions for how to use constant bitrate mezzanine codecs and variable bitrate mezzanine codecs. And it also supports a high compression. So you could do H.264 and HEVC with IPMX, and there's a fleet of products that are going to be announced by different companies in 2025 with that kind of stuff. So IPMX supports a lot of media profiles. It supports a lot of networking profiles. So, in some productions, like if you're in the entertainment space doing, Metallica concerts or things like that, we're talking about systems that really have a very tight level of synchronization. So the level of PTP is very high on systems like that. So IPMX equipment, when you put it on a system that uses a very high level of PTP like that, it can use that clock and it can behave accordingly. Some environments in corporate AV, there's synchronization on the system, but the PTP level is less. You don't need special switches, boundary clock switches to use it. You can use regular corporate switches, so like, for example, a Dante audio environment is synchronized and it works perfectly, but you can deploy it more easily on standard networking equipment. So IPMX supports this as well. And so the standards are there to sort of try to restore the ability to use the media options that you want and the networking options that you want across these three asset classes. And for everything else, lots of gateways. So the ability to convert between the different medias within IPMX, but also the ability to convert from different protocols in and out of IPMX. So there's already companies that have announced NDI IPMX gateways, HD-based IPMX gateways, and there's more coming. There's already native compatibility with Dante devices, because you can put Dante devices into AES-67 mode, and IPMX is natively interoperable with AES-67. So there's a lot of ecosystem considerations that the standards have taken to try to remain as flexible as possible to keep that connectivity that we now enjoy with HDMI going into the next generation.
Well, so I mean, let's be sort of like real here, and that is, Joel, y'all have more AV over IP devices installed than any other brand. Crestron does as a brand. And by the way, you're muted, so I want to make sure you unmute before you answer this question. So if I look at the way I look at it, is I see there's two types of AV over IP buyers. That's my philosophy. And so I kind of want you to answer this question, Joel, because I feel like that a lot of that one whole set of those buyers wants you to incorporate IPMX, whether through a gateway, as Sam just described, or allow it to go across your platform. Because there's two types of buyers. Those that understand the technology and that'll use whatever they want to use. The people that have been in the industry, people like John Fleiter, who asked a question. I'm going to have you answer his question a little bit later. He's been in the industry a long, long time. He's a university guy, and people like that who know the industry, know companies like Crestron, and we know Crestron knows how to do AV signal routing and control, and so we're going to stick with Crestron. But then there's the people that are sort of like fringe. They're people that last month they're in charge of paving the parking lot of the university for a new building, and then this month they're in charge of installing AV campus wide. They're facility people, and they don't really understand the technology, nor do they really care. But IPMX is appealing to them because it's hard to get fired if you go with the standard. Like if things don't work out, then you can always say, "But I went with the standard." So Joel, I'd love to know, is that something on the radar that Crestron's looking at, IPMX, or how would you respond to that? Because currently, right now, you can't plug IPMX into Crestron or vice versa.
Yeah, IPMX is obviously a point of interest for Crestron to keep looking at. We're always interested in what the industry defines as the standard and where we need to pivot to. But yeah, you're right. Today, MVX and IPMX would be a connection over a medium like HDMI or something, right? Not a connection over the network. So not an interop in that sense. But I guess what we're always balancing is, there's interop is probably one of the more common requests we get for moving to IPMX is the interop conversation. And as a company developing our technology, we're always balancing interop versus innovation, right? And for us, we can continue to innovate on our MVX protocol and keep adding stuff that we believe the market needs from Crestron devices. So that's where we are today, but we're always, aware of what's happening in the industry. And like we added AES 67 to NVX, right? That's a standard. Nothing's ruled out in the future for sure.
Yeah. So I know that I've been asked this many times, a lot of AV, people would love to see that as a whether it's a gateway or an in and out option, an on-ramp, off-ramp option to the NVX. I know that's a possibility. John Fleiter's question, I don't know which one of you would know the answer to this. I feel like if we had someone on from Netgear, they could probably answer this question, but he's asking the question of which is more popular for AV over IP, 1 gig versus 10 gig. I know the simple answer is 1 gig. Obviously, most people are going 1 gig, but I wonder if either one of you has any data specifically around what percentage of the systems have been done 10 gig. You'd have to have the answer would be a combination of three things. How many people are putting in IPMX and using it at a higher bandwidth than 1 gig, I guess would be one of the answers. How many people have put in SDVoA, and then how many people have put in Extron Nav at 10 gig because it's variable bandwidth. Do either one of y'all have any knowledge of that, or is that the kind of thing that IPMX or AIMS Alliance is paying attention to, Sam?
Oh, absolutely. There's, I'm sure that everyone has slightly different figures because it's still a bit of a beginning as far as volumes go for AV over IP. But let's say the market is approximately 2 million devices a year right now between A-speed chips and SDVoE chips and implementations from various leaders like Crestron and other companies. Out of those 2 million units, this is really the subframe latency stuff in the market. So people that are preoccupied with not only doing AV over IP, but have a certain performance criteria for that AV over IP. So the great majority of that is 1 gig. It's overwhelmingly the majority. There's a very, very small percentage of that is above 1 gig. And There's a variety of reasons for that. It's not strictly because there's a preference for 1 gig over something that's higher bandwidth. It's that there's a lot of equipment already installed. It's that sometimes from a networking point of view, if you're building a big system, it becomes very, very involved if you're using high bandwidth solutions. You have to know how to design that network for that kind of media. So I think there's a lot of reasons that explain why 1 gig is used. It's not necessarily because it's a taste choice all the time. It's because there's a lot of practical considerations around it.
Yeah, it's not a simple issue. I totally get it. I think that, in reality, most people don't actually need a lot of bandwidth. In reality, we're connecting up a laptop. We're, playing videos from the internet. We're showing maybe 2 pieces of content at the same time. We're doing Microsoft Teams. We're doing Zoom. And in reality, we don't need a lot of bandwidth. So I think we're finding that people are tending to gravitate towards the lower bandwidth. But when we do need more bandwidth, if we go with an ecosystem that doesn't have it, we're kind of trapped, Joel, in a way, because we don't have the ability to do that. It's almost, and I have an interesting approach, because it was interesting to me that the folks at Valens said, well, we see a lot of people putting in AV over IP, but then also adding HD-based-T inside of a room. So maybe they put an AV over IP inside the facility to go facility-wide, but inside the room, they still go HD-based-T. I think that's the way a lot of people are using Crestron, Joel, because you do support HD-based-T and AV over IP. Even though HD-based-T is not an AV over IP standard, I get the concept, Joel. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think we see a lot of customers that are putting in, for a simple point-to-point connection or getting content from A to B, HD-based-T is a fantastic way to do that. And from a cost delta point of view is very effective in that sense as well. Moving stuff outside of a room, or once that AB grows to many points inside of a room, that's where AV over IP can start to make a lot more sense. So we see deploy a lot of products in places like education. I always use this as an example. A simple classroom, connections to a projector, perfect place for something like HD-based-T. I want to join those rooms together. AV over IP is probably a great way to achieve that. Or I go into a lecture room where I have 20, 30 potential sources in a flipped learning environment with students connecting. Hey, AV over IP is probably still going to be the most effective way to do that, to scale into that space. So, it depends on the space and what's happening in the space, and then how many of those spaces are being interconnected. There's not always a need to move content from room to room either, right? Some rooms can sit standalone and be perfectly fine. But if there is a need, AV over IP obviously makes that quite easy to do.
What percentage are you willing to tell me? Because you can easily say no because you don't want to tell me. But I'm just curious, what percentage of the new jobs coming into Crestron right now, where people are doing video routing and distribution, are AV over IP versus traditional HD-based-T or HDMI and so on and so forth? Are we seeing it trend over 50% AV over IP yet?
We're still seeing a pretty solid trend of larger HD-based-T deployments transition to AV over IP. That seems to be still going, and AV over IP is still growing very rapidly for us. We are also seeing that HD-based-T grow, but it's in the spaces like we described, right? It's in our DM Essentials range where it's 4 inputs going to a single display, or up to 2 displays. That kind of market is growing as well rapidly for us. So there's obviously what we believe we're seeing is a crossover from those larger deployments, many ins to many outs, transitioning to AV over IP as a default.
Yeah, and Gary,
so
it's not necessarily
binary.
Go ahead, I view them as also working quite hand in hand, like Joel said earlier. In fact, there's some interesting mixtures that people are assembling. There's a company that just took the publicly available open specifications for NMOS and turned their HD-based-T switcher into something that was NMOS controllable. What that leads to in an IPMX environment is from an NMOS control plane, you get 2 levels of switching. You can have, for example, a bunch of HD-based-T cameras hooked up to a switcher. The switcher is hooked up to an AV over IP sender. and you could use from the same control plane, which of the cameras behind the HDBaseT switcher you want to see, and then you can switch at the IP level, which transmitters you want to send to which receivers. So I don't see these things as binary. I think that people are going to continue to use the equipment that exists and new equipment and HDBaseT whenever it makes sense. And there's so many considerations of HDBaseT as well, right? It's not an IP-based solution. From a security point of view, people are very comfortable with that as the user-facing equipment in some cases. So I see these things coexisting for quite some time.
When we talk about specific applications, I kind of want to run through some applications with you. And if you were in charge of a facility with these types of rooms, what would you put in? I'm curious because there's going to be a limit to what you can and can't do. I'm going to start with esports, because I noticed that, Joel, at ISC, I believe it was, I drove a car simulator that you had in your booth. I think it was at ISC. That was kind of cool. So obviously you're looking at esports as a potential, and you talked about in that demo about using the NVX system for esports. There are some limitations there, though, right? I mean, we can't use the NVX to send the content to the players, right? I mean, we're going to have to go uncompressed completely to the players and the observers, refs, and that kind of stuff. But where can IPMX be, or where can NVX be used? When do you have to go higher bandwidth? Like if you were doing esports, Joel, what would you do? A mixture of HDBaseT and NVX, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, esports in particular, people are very particular about getting that signal directly from the console to the display they're operating from a frame rate standpoint, and also just a general keeping them up on the competition viewpoint. And there's a lot of reasons to continue to do that, but then extending that signal beyond to people viewing that in the general, in a esports stadium, for example, which we see a lot of popping up in universities these days, right? Full-blown esports stadiums. That's where NVX can help to distribute that signal to a wider set of displays that maybe aren't needing those higher frame rates as directly. And whilst we do support some higher frame rates on NVX, we don't want to be in the way of that signal, right? That's very important.
What is the highest frame rate you can support on NVX?
So we do up to 120 frames on some very particular aspect ratios, I guess. And primarily that was driven for VR applications for the most part.
And Sam, what about IPMX? Is there any limitation in frame rate there? Is that also dependent on bandwidth or no?
So again, IPMX supports many different media profiles, including uncompressed, and there is no limit to frame rates. When you say that, of course, that's the standard. That's not limited. Right. There's implementations of the standard into equipment, and then those have limits.
It doesn't mean that every brand is using everything, right? I mean, you have to build a transmitter, receiver, encoder, decoder to do what you need it to do for your application. So you'd have to look and see what each brand is doing, because there's, 5 or 6 of you guys building IPMX encoders and decoders right now.
Right. There's other considerations, though. If you have an uncompressed system, you can build an uncompressed system to manage a certain part of your facility. It is possible to bridge that, let's say, synchronized uncompressed network to an AV distribution system. Making that easier is also appealing. If you're mixing 2110 with PTP, for example, with an AV distribution system without PTP, what some people are considering to do is on their 2110 network that is usually 25 gigs for every 4K signal, they also have gateways that can kick down the 25 gig to 1 gig, and they connect that series of high-end switches for the 25 gig network to the switches operating the AV over IP distribution network, but they're using the 1 gig copy on the AV distribution system. So everything is all in IP. There's no HDMI connections in the picture, but you could have 25 gig and 1 gig systems coexisting with the same content.
Okay, yeah, I get it. I think you both agree that classrooms and meeting rooms 1 gig is plenty for 99% of those applications out there. What about live events? You talked about Metallica. I've never been to a Metallica concert. You mentioned them, Sam. My generation, I guess I would probably want to see Coldplay. I probably wouldn't want to go see some of the newer artists that are out there right now. But ultimately, live events have a whole lot of AV technology now, a lot more than ever before. It's more than just image magnification. They're actually using it for art. They're using it for signage. They're using it for content distribution. What would you use there, Sam? What would you, if you were doing a Metallica concert, they're going to be doing more than image magnification, right? They're going to be distributing video all over the place. What would you use?
There's so many things in live events. There's lighting, there's the video distribution system, there's the audio, and one of the issues that is creeping in is security. How to make sure that people cannot take advantage of an IP-based system to put some inappropriate content on these screens that you can see from an airplane if you're flying over Las Vegas, for example.
Right.
So there's lots of considerations, and there's a big difference on the scale of live events. There's obviously between venues and budgets and things like that. Quite a substantial variation, and some people are going to prefer a one-stop shop where a solution provider offers an integrated experience where their senders and receivers work harmoniously, and there's a deterministic experience, and they don't have to worry too much about making other things work together. And others, they want control. They want to know exactly how to adjust everything. They want control over the bit rates. They want control over permissions. They want control over every aspect of the system. And so you have to cater to all of these different stakeholders, and not one solution fits every situation, unfortunately.
And that makes it really tough for the AV professional, because they've got in a live event like esports, actually, I look at them as very similar. You're building 3, 4, potentially even 5 systems in one. I mean, you mentioned 3 of them, Joel, in esports. A 4th one you did mention is sending a stream to Twitch. Then we're now talking about going H.264, 265, like we are doing here. By the way, this is how we're bringing this broadcast to you. We're starting out with 1080 cameras here, but you're not seeing this in 1080. We're compressing the hell out of it to get it to you, and you're also seeing it a minute or two delayed from what we're doing. But ultimately, I think what Sam just said is important, that you have sort of a varying amount of. You're going to have to vary your system. You're going to have to base it on application. One of the things that has come up a lot recently, Joel, is NDI. Is people asking about NDI compatibility and what the influence of NDI. Tell me what Crestron's thinking about with regard to NDI.
Yeah, we have a number of products that do NDI through our cameras in Automate VX, or our One Beyond intelligent video setup. So we do distribute NDI in places where we think that it makes a lot of practical sense, and in those systems where it is cameras directly to an appliance, I guess, that's taking those streams and compositing them for Teams calls. We do use NDI. We don't have a native NDI integration with MBX today. But
you must be people asking about that, right? I mean, it's becoming, especially with NDI 6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, again, another very interesting point we're looking at, because we have had a long history of integrating with those broadcast environments, but typically we have SDI switches for that purpose, and then we have the extension of those signals outside with MBX to other spaces, and that's where it was a nice integration. As all that shifts to being network based, that integration kind of changes a little bit, right? We get a chance to be a bit cleaner in that integration. So yeah, definitely a point of interest.
I want to direct this question to you. It was Joel, since you're on this topic right now. It's from Gavin Coatsner, I believe is how to pronounce the name. Would we see Crestron move to a more all-in-one kind of approach with the NVX range, similar to what you just introduced, and similar to what you've done with the DMPS and HDPS ranges? And when will we see display devices also have built-in AV over IP encoders and decoders? Like, has NVX, like for Crestron, have you gone to any of the display companies that said, hey, why not put in an NVX receiver? I'm sure you're thinking the same thing, Sam. with regard to an AV over IP receiver. Joel, I guess I'm going to address the first two questions to you first, and that is that all-in-one question and then that receiver question.
Yep. Yeah. So the receiver question I'll take first. So that's an easy one. We have a solution out there today for that. We did have at one point a MBX decoder that was based on a standard that now is not used anymore, but to connect directly to displays. We've shifted that now. Our strategy to that is now we have our software MBX product that can be decode a signal that can live on an SDM slot inside of
Okay, so any SDM slot can host the software, and then you can pick up the signal. And I guess that would be picked up at H.264, 265?
That's direct picking up an MBX stream. So it's the full
direct MBX
stream. MBX stream. Yep.
Okay.
So that's a point of interest. We're speaking to a lot of display manufacturers about how to I guess get them to mobilize that. But the reality is it's an SDM compute. As long as it meets the tech specs and fits in that display, that then drops us to a one cable solution then, right? Network cable into the display, obviously power as well, but it's quite a neat installation. So that's for the receiver side. We would love to have MBX more natively embedded through, directly into the display itself. But that's our solution at the moment that gets us a one cable.
And what about the all-in-one question? Are you looking at more products like what you just introduced, where you have, instead of having a whole bunch of different encoders and decoders, an all-in-one and transcoder approach to everything?
Yeah, we definitely are. Yeah, I'm going to say the classic roadmap story. Stay tuned. There is stuff coming down very soon in our roadmap. But we always build MBX with this mindset, right? We build MBX on an FPGA because we wanted to lift it and port it to other things. Software MBX is the first place for that, but it doesn't stop there. We have plenty of other places we want to port it to. So, like the old Intel Inside story, there is an MBX Inside story coming soon as well.
Okay. So, all right. Well, make sure you let us break the news. Both of y'all probably know Michael Braithwaite. He used to work for Crestron and also was the first, I think he's the first patent holder of AV over IP intelligence in our industry years and years ago, probably 15 years ago. He asked the question of both of you. Sam first. What do you see on both encoders and decoders when it comes to PoE negotiations from the PSE switch to reduce the power to a very low consumption, like 1 watt or less? Especially when we do have some cities and states where they're talking about making that a requirement. Sam, does IPMX address this?
Absolutely. It's a very important question. Some people are comfortable using PoE Plus or PoE Plus Plus with their application, but this is involved. Like there's complexity when you start to have systems on a big scale with equipment like this, heat-wise, energy-wise, complexity-wise. There's definitely a push towards lower power devices, but then users have to understand that with lower power devices, you have to live within the constraints of what you can deliver on low power devices, capabilities-wise. So there's a lot of education required in this area to give users lists of it's all possible, but here are the classes of things you can do at very low power. Here's what you could do with medium power, and here's what you could do with more power.
And Joel, are y'all doing the same thing, or do you already have that functionality built in when you go into standby mode? You're using less than 1 watt, or how are you addressing that?
Yeah, at the moment we do have standby modes where we turn off fans and turn off as much processing as we can. We're not below that 1 watt at this juncture, but it is, in our ESG kind of approach as a company, it is something we're super interested in as well as solving for. So we do this in a number of our audio amplifiers where it's a little bit easier to switch them off and bring them back online again when they see a signal. From a video encoding and decoding standpoint, there's still some startup times and stuff that we feel would impact that. So we have some work to do there to make that a more seamless approach.
One of the examples, Gary, of an area where there's some interesting power savings available is, again, going back to those SoCs and devices in the market that already have embedded hardware blocks on them. Like your phone doesn't consume that much power. You could watch a whole movie on your phone and still have battery left over. That would not be possible if you were just doing all of the decoding of that movie in software.
Yeah.
There's some dedicated technology in your phone to permit a very, very good media outcome with very low power. So, when we're talking to camera guys about implementing IPMX and display companies implementing IPMX and things like that, it's, obviously those blocks that are common in those types of devices are going to be really critically featured workflows that operate on very low power. And one of the things that we're trying to do a little bit of education on is, even within the codecs that are accelerated on various devices, sometimes there's profiles within those codecs, and you can sometimes deliver some latency improvements or quality improvements or things like that just by understanding what the different things support. So I think education is one of the most important subjects when it comes to power mitigation on a large scale. But I think that there's some very interesting capabilities available once you understand that you can pick from a buffet of media options.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to watch. I'm curious, Dante kind of exploded at the right moment in time to really simplify signal routing distribution of something that is using very low bandwidth, right? I mean, like, it is nothing not like what video uses. So people a lot of times say, well, how did Dante happen so quickly and it's taking so long for the video side of things? But and you do have 500 plus companies, including all of you, that support it. I'm curious, if we were to go forward 5 years from now, as we now have IPMX, we now have all these other video options, will Dante still be around? Will it go to just AES-67, or will it just become part of the network stream and it doesn't really matter how you do it? Like, I'm curious what y'all's thoughts on that. Maybe you don't want to say because you've got a great relationship with Audinate. I don't know. I'm honestly curious whether or not that will change things. Sam, what do you think?
Oh, Dante is going to continue to exist for a very, very, very long time. But there's AES-67 support in a very, very high percentage of Dante devices, and a lot of those devices are also implementing NMOS. So you're going to have so much flexibility. You'll be able to use the same device with a Dante control plane, or an NMOS control plane, or a Crestron control plane. There's going to be so many things that you can do with the same equipment. So yes, they will coexist for quite some time. I think that when it comes to Dante, the adoption had to do a lot with the fact that audio can, because of its lower bandwidth, could be more easily networked than when people have to deal with the video goals that they have for themselves, which sometimes require more bandwidth and a little bit more media planning for their system design. But when it comes to the world of audio, even though there's really good standards like AES-67 that Dante is compatible with, that Crestron is compatible with, that IPMX is compatible with, there's still other things that are going to exist for a long time as well. In the event space, for example, there's synchronization that occurs on layer 2 switching for lighting, and they have audio standards like Milan that there's some purists that really believe in that's the way to go for their event space, and that will continue to exist as well. I don't think that there's going to be a massive convergence when it comes to all of the different audio options and all of the different video options in the next 5 years. I think that if anything, it's more constructive to think about what can be bridged, what could be adapted, so that useful systems can be built out of multiple protocols and multiple media types.
So one of the questions are actually, John Ballard made a point and then kind of made another point that's kind of a question. His first point was that he's using AV over IP for everything, even critical facilities. The equipment lives in legit AV IDFs and has no problems. He said, but the second comment was, generally staying with they generally use 1 gigabit. Is fine bandwidth wise, unless they have absolutely defensible requirements requiring higher. building a full 10 gigabit Cisco Catalyst, and the planted infrastructure supporting them is vastly more CapEx based than OpEx based. And our industry seems to be, especially with the larger clients, larger facility adoptions, tends to like to go more to the OpEx realm. So I think what he's saying there, and I'm guessing you would agree, because Joel, you nodded your head, that 1 gig is probably going to be the sort of standard kind of approach for AV over IP in most of the ProAV applications.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, there's two, moving from 1 gig to 10 gig kind of has two things to keep in consideration. The cost of the infrastructure is higher. The cost of the switches is higher. The cabling requirements being the infrastructure piece is also higher. But also then there's some added complexity with scaling that signal beyond, which I think we discussed in this as well, right? Scaling 10 gig signal to thousands of endpoints across a facility is challenging. You have to have some, not that it's not easy on 1 gig, right? It's hard on 1 gig as well, but it gets 10 times harder on 10 gig, right? The bandwidth requirements go up 10 times. So,
literally.
Yeah, literally. So that is hard to do. So, but we do see a number of AV over IP deployments that are in a room, staying in a room, less than 48 ports fits in a switch. In those situations, 10 gig can make some sense. But there's also, there's bandwidth in between those two as well, right? There's multi-gig at 2.5 and 5 gig, which is becoming interesting as well for a number of resolutions that can fit at 2.5 gig, but still use Cat5e as a cabling structure or Cat6 cabling structure. And relatively cost-effective switches. So as we see more of an adoption of things like 8K and some real practical use cases for it, and things like meeting rooms and classrooms, that's an interesting point as well. Is instead of jumping all the way to 10, there is a middle of the road there as well.
So I'm curious. I mean, I hear you talking, and both of y'all are incredibly more knowledgeable about AV over IP than I ever will be. I'm curious, what minimum educational level do you think that the system specifiers, designers, and even potentially the people selling AV over IP need to have? Like, where should they go and where should they get this education, Sam? If you're designing AV systems, one of the guys that's going to come on our next session is a friend of mine, Mark Peterson. He's going to talk about AI and ProAV. This dude has more education than anyone I know. I mean, the guy knows everything about everything. He attends everything. He learns everything. But what's the minimum you need to know for AV over IP, Sam? Where do I go? Do I go to Cisco school, or where do I go?
Vendors definitely have good training. There is effort. Organizations like AIMS are not for profit, right? It's all volunteers, right? So it's a little bit harder with all volunteer organizations with no money to build up a repertoire of training. But there is some investment, even user-sponsored investment going into that, and there will be some generic training about how to buy switches, how to configure systems for media, considerations of that type. Also, just education about basic media options. So some options are good for this, some options are good for that, and sort of giving people how to shop with a good vocabulary. But that needs to also carry over when buyers are speaking to vendors, because the vendors will explain the nuances of their products, what is supported out of that big range of things that are supportable, who's doing what exactly. So I think that there's a two-tier education system. One is, a vocabulary, and AIMS is working really hard at introducing a training in the next few months that will be that basic vocabulary that people could use. But then we turn it over to companies like my peer here to explain exactly what they've got. Here's all of the things that our products can actually do. So users have to have both.
You're on mute, Gary.
Sorry about that, Joel. I want to know, how do I become a product marketing manager at Crestron for AV over IP? You must have a knowledge of AV over IP, and you must have gained some networking knowledge somewhere, because you can't just be a product manager for this stuff without having that knowledge. What did you do? Can you kind of take us through that journey?
Yeah, I mean, I have a history with Crestron of coming up to 16 years now. So I've seen us introduce AV over IP, I guess, in our portfolio and watched that journey. And, you know, and even when we introduced our original digital media products as well, right, seeing that transition to a different approach to deploying that was, that certainly were interesting, right? But the way we've always viewed that as a vendor, as Crestron, is if we're going to introduce a technology we believe that is different to what people are used to doing, we need to support that with the training to the market to make sure that we're not just pushing a product out there and saying good luck. So, you know, we do this with our intelligent video solutions today as well. We offer training. We really make sure that people that come and buy the product from us and pros in the field go and do that training, and then extend that training out. So for us, we quite often split that into design training and engineering training. Design training being how do I, you know, put lines on a bit of paper to make sure I don't get myself in trouble when I understand the product, and then engineering training being how do I configure and deploy this product. And in amongst primarily the engineering training, there's a lot of network knowledge that we bring into those courses as well. And our stance is we obviously, as a vendor, want people to come and do the Crestron training, buy the Crestron products, but please go do other vendors training as well. I think as Sam said, they all have little nuances to the way they operate. There's great courses out there from companies like Audinate and Netgear and others. So go and do those, learn the differences, learn the vocabulary. We all do slight nuances for good reason, but learning that and knowing that will be super important out in the field.
Yeah, it's probably been 10 years now. I went and got the Cisco CCNA certification because I wanted to at least understand what the heck I was talking about on a base level. But I feel like I'm so underserved by that now because the industry is using so much more network than we ever did, 10 years ago. But I would certainly recommend it if you can take the Cisco Certified Network Associate, which is a CCNA. It's an entry-level certification for IT. It gives you the basic, at least you can talk the talk and understand when somebody says that how it uses bandwidth and where it goes and how certain switches can do certain things and others can't. You at least have that knowledge how to configure ports and why they have to be done that way. And that it's great. So I would certainly recommend that as a minimum. And you are correct. The brands have done a really good job of having their own education and providing that education has been helpful in the industry. Both of y'all have done great. I have followed AIM since the beginning of all of this, even before you had come up with IPMX as a name. And so that's been great. You've always been welcoming to allow anyone to kind of sit in those meetings. 90% of what y'all talk about, I have no idea what it is, but I feel like I'm getting something from it through osmosis. So I think if you have a conference a couple of times a year, Sam, where you kind of get together and talk about, the standard and what, different versions of it and what features you're adopting. When is the next conference? And obviously, I guess I can go to aimsalliance.org to follow this. But when is the next conference? Because I know you do at least a couple a year.
Yeah, there's lots of events. There's interop events. There's gatherings at some of the key trade shows like ISC, Infocom, IBC, NAB. There's some dedicated events for the organizations themselves, like the VSF puts on VidTrans and a few other events. These are things that people can openly register for, and you get a mixture of people in those audiences. There's end users, there's manufacturers, there's consultants, there's integrators, there's academics. They're all sitting side by side and chewing on problems that we all have and figuring out, the order of operations for what we solve next.
Yep. So go to aimsalliance.org. And Joel, from Crestron's standpoint, do I need to go to Masters? What do I need to do to kind of get the education on everything to know about what you're doing with AV over IP?
Yeah, Masters is a great place to do that if that's where you want to come to. But we also have obviously the trade events we're at, where we at Infocom we did some training in conjunction with the show and at VIXA, but we also have our training centers all around the globe. So we have a training portion of our website, and it's crestron.com/training. When you go on there, you'll be able to find all the locations we have, which are truly across the globe. We have a number of on-demand courses online as well. A lot of our design courses are also not necessarily classroom driven. You don't have to come into a classroom. You can do those remote as well. So and that covers everything from Crestron. So yeah, jump on and check those out.
Well, Sam, Joel, I really appreciate you both joining me and be willing to kind of go through this. This has been a great update on AV over IP, and you've answered some really questions honestly, and I appreciate your forthrightness, but also your cooperation between both of you being willing to do this. So thank you very much for doing this to both of you, and I look forward to seeing both of you at ISE in February. And now, Megan, I'm going to bring Megan back on. I'm very excited about this session. As you know, Megan, Mark Peterson and I are good friends, and the dude, as I said, he there's not a certification in our industry he does not have. He's going to be humble about it, but I know for a fact that he has it. And he was talking about AI and AV before OpenAI made their big announcement in November 2022. I want to put that out there. The dude was talking about AI before mainstream anyone was talking about AI. So you've got a perfect guest here for this next session, which I'll be watching with bated breath. So
yeah, I'm excited. Mark is fantastic. Dave Hatch is fantastic. He handles kind of all things AI for CTI, which, as you know, is one of the largest integrators in the world. So yep. I'm stoked. Let's bring them on. Hi, guys.
The more you know, the more you don't know. That's what happens, right? Expanding knowledge and awareness. Thank you, Gary, for those flattering words. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys. You're doing an amazing job. This week has been a fantastic week. I'm learning a lot, and you're doing such a good job of keeping us captivated and moving forward. So thank you very much for all your hard work.
Oh, thank you. Well, Mark, I know Gary gave you a little intro, but why don't you intro yourself to our audience?
Okay, so I am from SM&W, Shen Milsom Wilkie, and we are multidisciplinary. We're a pure consulting firm, so we don't do design build. We are just your client advocates, and we're global, and I run the audiovisual practice. And of course, that's a kind of all moving around, right? You got a little IT, you got a little everything involved now these days with AV. So that's what I do, and I'm looking forward to talking to you today, Meg.
Yeah, I'm stoked. Dave, what about you?
Yeah, so you mentioned it. I'm with CTI. We're the largest privately owned U.S. integrator, one of the largest in the world. My focus is around AI day to day, leading the innovation, and then really bringing it forward, making sure that we're not just talking about AI, but we're actually putting it to use. My background goes back 25 years in the industry. I'm a Crestron Diamond certified programmer. So in the last session, we were talking about Crestron Masters. I get the opportunity to talk to over 1,000 system developers and designers every year at Masters. And one of the topics that's become really relevant to that group is AI. So I'm really excited to join you guys here and to really talk it through.
Yeah, let's dig in because this is a little mini session, and I know you both will have a lot to say. I'm actually excited to hear you guys converse back and forth because I think you'll both have some interesting thoughts to play off of each other. So what impact is AI-driven system automation having on the efficiency and scalability of ProAV solutions, particularly in large-scale environments like live events or enterprise installations?
Sure. So I'm going to kick this off now. I want to make sure we get to part 2, and I want to be able to blow your minds with some new concepts. So let's get through this part called automation, because Dave, I think you agree with me probably that this concept AI everywhere kind of stuff, you can tack this word onto pajamas. I mean, you can, right? This is automation, right? This is preset recall. The idea here is we're after quality, we're after performance, and we have to manage complexity, and we have to be able to solve complexity to do better operational proficiency. So if it could be more proficient, then everyone's going to be happy, right? Solve more with less, in theory, but don't throw out the guy who's in the room. I mean, a lot of this stuff is about, oh, we can may have fewer people. Some of those people are not the most paid, but they're most engaged with the client, with the venue, with the situational awareness. We talk about that too. It's used a lot in AI terminology. In this case, you need this, like autonomous car, you need the driver there who's going to be able to pick up the ball when things need to go manual. And I think that's the point here. Everything I understand, Dave, now maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's like when they do the game of Go or they do the game of chess, the assumption is everything's consistent, reliable, and repeatable. They're not gambling. And yet we know in live events and even in enterprises, when you deal with networks, there are things that are going to go wrong, right? There is things that they cannot predict. So we need to be aware of that. In the future, I'm hoping there's going to be another layer of being able to manage and manipulate and get you in a position to address the potential risk, the gamble, the card you can't see, right? Right now, it's not doing that. So what you need to be able to do is look at how to ensure consistency and reliability. And to do this, what I recommend is to have some sort of heads-up display so you know what's going on, right? I can tell what's going on. I can tell when I need to get manual control. I have both automated controls and manual controls, and I can pick up those controls. I need to be able to reset pre-call and go through each step in my complex preset recalls so that I can troubleshoot and easily save it. I'm not going to use these tools if they're complicated, right? I want to be able to improve my processes, not they make it so complicated I don't understand what's going on and I can't find the errors in whatever I programmed, and being able to customize it. And the third part, David, I'm going to hand over to you, is a lot of the solutions we're seeing here are about, as we heard in the last call, about ecosystem. So as long as you stay in the ecosystem, you get those capabilities. But as soon as you want to introduce other products, now you're at risk. So you need to strike a balance of, is the value of having these automations and capabilities greater than the potential that down the road I need a different DSP, a different set of microphones, or different performance requirements. I want to be able to replicate this and keep this consistent in investment, right? It's not just one and done. So those trade-offs are to be considered. David, over to you.
I think that's an awesome call out, Mark. And I think especially when we talk about live events, when we talk about the larger spaces, larger venues, that human in the loop is really important. We talk about it a lot when we're talking personal tools, generative AI, and those kind of tools, the value the human brings, and using the AI to augment you, to give you superpowers. And there's a lot of opportunity in the live event space for that, but I think you're absolutely right. It's not going to replace you. Now, I would say on the flip side, when we get into smaller spaces, into the meeting room, into the classroom, I think there might be more opportunities there for AI to contribute in a more autonomous way. When we look at the audio of a conference room, 25 years ago, we would have had an audio specialist come in, and they would have taken a day or two with their RTA and with their tuning rig, with an immense skill set to make that room sound phenomenal. That's a lot of work. And frankly, that's why it didn't happen in a lot of rooms. Now we've got products out there that use AI and machine learning to press a button and they tune themselves. One of the things I'm actually really excited to see, and I've seen this starting to emerge from some of our vendors, is products that take that approach, and we're going to self-tune the room. We're going to become self-aware. We're going to use AI and machine learning to understand where I'm pointed in a room, and maybe even retune the room every night. And to me, that's the area of our industry where there's opportunity for more autonomous action, as opposed to your point about the human in the loop. We can't lose sight that AI is not the thing we should focus on. AI is the tool that enables what we should focus on, which is the same as it's been forever. Human-centric design, the experience, delivering that usability to an end user. AI is just the tool that sometimes is behind the scenes enabling it. And it's great that we're all talking about this and aware of it and pushing ourselves in the industry forward. But we also got to be really careful we don't lose sight of putting in AI for AI's sake.
I think that's like the common theme in our industry. When any new technology comes out, we always say, like, don't do it just so that you're using this specific technology. You really have to use it when it's appropriate. So how do you see the AI landscape evolving, the landscape of particularly video conferencing and control systems? And what kind of innovations do you think are going to reshape the user experience in these areas?
Okay, I want to break this down into two parts. First is the advancements, and I would call this the red ocean, right? These are iterations on current, and then I want to go to blue ocean, which I think is really important. So in advancements, most recently, the ability to use, like in Telemex with Zoom and with Microsoft. Soon you're going to be able to bring your laptop in, and the camera that's in your laptop will be able to be used as a part of the conference room. So rather than having the peripheral cameras being able to do the automatic preset recall that we're all talking about, APR, APRC, that concept is great. But in future, the platforms, and the platforms are the bus, right? Everything peripheral is a windshield wiper on the bus, right? But soon you'll be able to go in with your laptop, and it will sense where you are, whether you're on your laptop and whether you're looking at the camera at the front of the room or the screen at the front of the room, whether you're looking at a laptop, and choose the best image for you. That's very interesting because now you can, not once assuming they can solve Dave the audio, right, which is a big problem, but then you can gain more data. Okay, this is again down the same line as intelligent meetings or taking notes and all that stuff. There's a completely different animal in the room now. In the next, we're saying if the pundits are right, the level of technology advancement, PhD level intelligence is going to be with us within 2 years. There's nothing currently, it's not like you have to go to the moon to pick up some kind of element that doesn't exist on Earth. You need GPUs and power. And now you're going to have at your fingertips a PhD level intellect. Now you're going to spend that level of smartness on room innovations or DSP settings? No. You're going to want to have a conversation and ask it the most important questions that you can possibly think of. Our entire industry needs to pivot and shift to recognize that the next individual to join the call is a combination of personality and content, and it's intelligent, and it needs to be brought in as a resource. And I predict the first thing, I call it BYOI, bring your own intelligence, because the intelligence is just one and done. The intelligence, and it's going to be happening, right? Apple's already setting you up with this on the phone. And this is another part, consumerization adoption is really critical, right? There's 4 factors that affect adoption. One of them is risk and trust, right? The second is familiarity. I mean, remember with Alexa didn't really work when you start talking, you know, in a conference room, Alexa, start my meeting kind of thing. I don't want to make Megan's go off. Who was it? Somebody went off last time. But that part, not so adoptable, right? No familiarity, no syntax. That's got to be solved, right? The third one is image. What is it going to be for me? Can I make a better image of myself? Well, now if I can do things smarter, better, faster, I got a better image of that. The last one's power or enablement. So it needs to enable or make things be more capable for me as a person to adopt it. Assuming all those things are in place, we're going to have the ability to talk to this device. And we're going to be doing it on our desktop. We're going to be doing it on our phone. We need to do it in the room. We need to do it in the classroom. We need to do it in the surgery room. We need to do it in the hospitality suites. This capability is so important for our industry because we're at both ends. We're the input side and the output side, right? And so we need to redefine when we say AI and talk about AI being the sort of iterations on smart, intelligent meetings, and now bring the smartness into the meeting. And most of this is going to happen on the platform, Dave. I'm going to turn it over to you. I think this is going to be platform-based at one, but just like we saw with it for Zoom, unable to do Teams, there's time-consuming, and my intelligence has been wrapped up like weeks and months. It knows me, right? I want to bring it along. You want to bring yours along, and the company wants us to share some kind of platform-based level of intelligence, and then they're going to spend more for super intelligent at the executive level. So there's policies involved, right? Just like reserving a room and a resource, you're going to reserve some sort of brain power that make you better, faster, and more capable in your job. Over to you, Dave.
No, 100% agree. The importance of the platform in the conference room is going to really continue to drive us. Real quick, Megan, to touch on the control side, because you asked about control. When you think back to why we have control in the first place, it's to create a simplified experience for the non-technical end users, and it's to bring together bespoke components to work as a system. We are going to see this need for control still there, but we're going to see it in a whole different realm. It's going to be augmenting. It's the bring your own intelligence, Mark, is spot on. It's going to be augmenting the experience of the platform, not worried about which boxes you're turning on and you're flipping to input 17. That's going to happen for you. It's really this, how do you drive the ability of the end user to be impacted by this intelligence in the room? That's the key to success 2 years from now, maybe sooner.
Interesting. So one more question for you guys. Are AI-powered predictive maintenance solutions helping to improve the reliability and longevity of AV systems, and why or why not?
So
all right, go ahead, Dave.
Mark, I want to take this one first, but
yep.
I'm going to say not yet. But the yet is the big emphasis there. One of the things that I look at is the power of agentic AI. So the power of being able to have a network of AI agents come together to deliver a solution. I think this is going to be the key that unlocks AI's impact in this area. If you look at it to date, most of the monitoring and management that has been successful in our industry is really based around vendor-specific silos. I know what my stuff is doing, but I don't necessarily know from just looking at that device how it's interconnected, how it's working with other things. And that makes it really tough for AI to just know what the problem is, to just solve it for you. As we're coming into this era where you're going to hear AI agent's going to be the buzzword that you're going to be sick of hearing 6 months from now. But the idea of having, super intelligence focused on specific topics. You're going to have an AI agent that is the expertise in your audio DSP, an AI agent that's the expertise in your video system, in your distribution products, in your conferencing platform. And what you're going to see then is those agents are going to start to coordinate their intelligence the same way a human help desk would. In a human help desk, you have a tier 1 person who just finds out that something's going wrong. They escalate it to an engineer to start to investigate. There's specialized skills that those engineers that are going to dig into it based on what you find come to the forefront. And what we're going to start to see is agents, AI agents, stitched together, communicating, and ultimately driving resolution of issues, because we've got the overseer that's bringing in the right talent from the AI agents that know where it thinks the problem are. They're going to check their results against each other. And this is going to happen in, eventually darn near real time. That's where the power of AI in the monitoring, the management, and enabling even services around the technology we go is headed, in my opinion. Mark, love to hear your take on this, because I think you look at it in a different lens maybe than I do.
Yeah, well, if you've used LM Notebook recently and you drop in files, what it can do is find needles in haystacks. It can find correlations that you can't find yourself. You don't have the time or the ability to look through all those tickets to find out what was the consistent problem that occurred every time this happened. What is the message below this? So where I'm going to bring this down to earth, because we talked David a lot, really high, Scott's, right? You've got to be, in order to be able to use this predictive analytics tools, and BiAmp QSE are examples of that. You either got to be in the ecosystem or to be able to use a lot of them, or it has certain requirements in hardware. What we look at is scaffolding. I have to be able to get out of the room. I have to have a consistent experience. I have to have a reliable experience. I need to have standards. Now I can create tools to do my monitoring, and now I can take AI into those tools and capabilities. So you can't just throw that on top of a pile of junk, right? But let's just take a look at one of the most important pieces of technology that we talk about all the time now. That's DirectView LED. And that product is now like one of the most expensive things that the client's going to buy. And we can all see a dead pixel, right? We can all see a failed part. But the campus is huge, and they're expecting the user, that $1 million display has an error and you didn't know about it. How come that is, right? So we're going to see, right? We already see the ability to anticipate a failure on that. But let's go through it. I can tell you if it's a failure. And then what I want to be able to do, once I know there's a failure, and maybe at a panel, maybe at a pixel, I want to be able to do something to augment it. I want to be able to change the colors of the adjacent pixels to minimize it. So this is self-healing, right? This is the ability for be able to minimize the error so I can get and fix it. From there, I want to be able to understand when's it next going to happen. And for that, it's not just my data. I mean, when you buy a spares kit for a DirectView LED, first of all, the product has not failed yet. It hasn't been on the market long enough to fail. They've had to stress test it and hope that they're stress testing the right things, vibration or heat or whatever, that may fail in the future, but they don't know because it hasn't been around long enough. So what we want to be able to do is take the correlation data that's happening from the individual. These are the problems I'm having, combine it with everyone else's problems, and compare that to what's happening when they're doing the stress testing. So predicting the anticipated correct spares accurately, intelligent spares kit is going to be super helpful because I got the right parts, because I got to store that stuff for years and years. And so I'm going to push the same thing to all the manufacturers, Dave. I'm going to expect them to be able to be much more intelligent about what's my resilience, what's my reliability model. Are you studying my tickets? Are you studying the tickets of everybody and making really sense of real-time data rather than just what you hope or anticipate the problem's going to be? And Megan, can't hear you.
Mike.
That's my first time today. So
it's okay.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. I would love to continue this conversation, but we went over our time. So Dave, if people want to learn more about you or they want to find you online, where can they get that information?
So I'm talking about AI all the time on LinkedIn. Both ways it impacts our industry, as well as ways to increase our own personal literacy around generative tools and now agentic AI tools. So that's probably the best spot to find me. The other thing I'll say is I've recently joined the team over at Microsoft, providing weekly tips around using their Copilot. So you can check out smtr.show to find me there.
Awesome. Mark, what about you?
Most of the stuff I publish is through our channel. So that usually ends up getting on LinkedIn, but our website is smwllc.com. And if you're out there as a manufacturer or if you're a service provider, we typically do lunch and learns for our internal groups. We're across the US and also into Europe and the Far East. And if you have an interesting product you think would be useful, let me know and we'll share that out as well. And look forward to talking to you again, Megan. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Let's bring back Steph. Hey, girl. Hey. Now you're muted.
Yeah, I was.
I know. Me,
Happens
you,
to
and
the
Gary
best
right
of
in a
us.
row.
Happens to the best of us. Some of us more often than others, me and you. But
Yes.
anyways, awesome session. That was fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that. And I can't wait to go, because sometimes when you're like in the middle of it, like obviously you're paying attention, but you can't absorb it all. So I got to go back and watch it tomorrow on the replay.
Yes. All right. Well, I'm excited to get my session started. So this is going to be a general ProAV update session. Joining me, we have Victoria Ferrari, Mark Donovan, and then I think we're going to have one more guest come as soon as we can get them on. But welcome, you guys. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing?
Hi, thank you.
So I'd like to go ahead and start by just having you both introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about who you are and what you do. Mark, do you want to start?
Sure. My name is Mark Donovan. I am the manager of the Applications Engineering Division at Audio-Technica US and have been for the last almost 15 years.
Very cool. Victoria?
I'm Victoria Ferrari. I'm a senior design consultant for CTI, an audiovisual integrator here in the US, and I've been in the AV industry for about 20 plus years.
Very cool. So, and look at that. Right in the nick of time, we have Kevin Henneman. Hi, Kevin. How are you?
Hey, Steph. Good. How are you?
Doing well. So you are just in time. I was just having Mark and Victoria just talk a little bit about who they are and what they do. So I'll have you go ahead and do that too.
So I'm Kevin Henneman. I'm the president and owner of KMH Integration. We are a systems integrator located in New York City. We do work pretty much all over the continental U.S. and that's who we are. There you go.
Very cool. So the first question that I want to throw to you guys, and I'm just going to throw each of these out and let you guys kind of just whoever wants to take it first can take it. I love when you guys bounce off of each other and respond to each other. And I'll also go ahead and I'll pepper in audience questions if we get any just mixed in. But I wanted to ask, first of all, what trends have emerged in ProAV system design over the past 6 months to a year that you guys think are shaping the industry in new ways?
I can go first if you want. So trends there, that's sort of an easy one, not necessarily dealing with the trends, but what we've seen, I mean, we started, our business started in the broadcast sector, if you will, and then we fairly quickly grew into like working on more what were considered traditional AV type systems. But what's happened in the last 2 years or so is that the AV over IP and the protocols that support that have sort of merged together, and we now have seen that the trend is that we have corporate and education, and pretty much everybody now is able to put high quality audio and video in spaces that were sort of being treated as, well, it's kind of good enough that we can see and hear people. That's not the approach anymore. The approach now is, well, I want a 4K camera in my conference rooms. I want the ability to mix audio and to basically, we're designing and building rooms that are being called broadcast light. And it's sort of just a merging of what's available out there right now, technology-wise.
Yeah, to back that up, Kevin, I completely agree with that. Like you said, that bar of what is expected out of the quality has certainly gone up, and a lot of that's been driven by a lot of new innovations and things. So the expectations of those end users is certainly much higher, and it even take it to the point where now they're starting to understand just how they can manipulate some of that technology. And a lot of the things I've been dealing with in the last 6 months, certainly in a boardroom type environment, is just exponentially more calls on, how can we integrate camera tracking and all this, stuff. So, they're getting much more savvy about what can be done. So helping guiding them that way is really, really taking a lot of my time, I'll tell you.
Yep, agreed. I mean, I would say that also, and I hate doing this because they're sort of buzzwords and buzz phrases, and we've all been dealing with that over the years as different technology emerges. But we have people now saying to us that they're mixing and matching. So they're like, whoa, it's become if you want to talk about trends, I mean, for us as an integrator, and we do a lot of that front end consulting too. A recent project we did, we had the architect was underneath us, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, the MEP folks were underneath us, and the acoustician, which is sort of new, but not really, because we all have to deal with those things. We have to deal with those trades and those disciplines no matter what. But so what I've seen is that the amount of software driven solutions certainly has increased. And maybe 2 or 3 years ago, there was, everyone's talking about, we're gonna virtualize everything. And between that and cloud systems that are available or solutions that are available, I mean, to us, it's just sort of like another. There are more tools in your toolkit, and depending upon the business model for the end user, some things might make more sense because they're more OpEx based. Other things might make more sense because they want to spend CapEx money. Or it's really just the trends are that there's a lot more tools at our fingertips. And the last little buzz, the AI sort of part of this. Which I had somebody say to me about a year ago, right before NAB last April. One of our customers said, Kevin, I really need you to go look around and find out what AI can do to help us. I'm like, that's a pretty broad statement. Like, can we define like where you want the help or where you need the help? And in their defense, that they're not sure. They just see that there's all these cool things happening. And and a simple thing there that is not simple. I shouldn't say simple, but when you use a piece of software that does like a newsroom system a rundown system, create your automated playlist and launch your lower thirds and prompters and all those things. There's a bit of that now happening where there's you can script a show using voice recognition, AI / that we're not really doing that yet, but it's kind of there, and I'm expecting that we will be doing things like that for sure. But that depends upon the end user, because there are other people that say, no, I want the dynamics of a live control room. We're doing a live show, and we want that kind of capability. We don't want to get away from that. Other people are like, yeah, but we're just doing like a couple of talking heads, and we're going to cut back and forth, and we have some B-roll, and why do I need 4 people in a control room or 6 people in a control room? Well, you don't. If you're going to sort of stay in that production mode, you don't, especially with the software tools that are out there now. But then the next thing you'll get is a couple months later, like, hey, we want to do a live sports show out of that same room, and we want to have remotes integrated, and so it's like, well, we talked about that, and you didn't say that 4 months ago or 6 months ago. So
right,
there's my more than 2 cents on that.
Victoria, anything you've noticed to add? Nothing that these guys haven't included. I mean, I think what's really cool is that the clients are becoming more educated in a way, in what they want. They don't know how to get there, but at least they know, who to go to and kind of what they want. And it's exciting that they do want higher quality stuff. Before it was like, hey, let's sit around the table and everybody open up your laptops and we'll just use the camera and the laptop and shift it around. And now it's like, hey, we want multiple cameras. We want everybody to be picked up. We want tracking. And so that's great. The other thing that they mentioned was in regards to, I feel like the architects are also becoming, more aware that AV needs to come in earlier, and it's important to get, a consultant hired early on in the process. And so we're seeing that more and more, and we have a division dedicated to meeting with architects and doing designs and things like that. And so that's a great trend. Something we've always wanted for the longest time was to meet with the architects earlier on in the process. So
Yeah, no, great points all around for sure. That does kind of lead me into my next question. I did want to ask about, client needs and expectations for sure have evolved recently, and it seems like that's happening quite rapidly. So, what strategies do you guys seeing being used to meet those demands? And Mark, even from the manufacturer side of things, I'm interested to see how you guys are listening to your integrator partners to help meet those demands as well.
Well, it is a key point for all of us. Every one of us here, from the sales team to the applications team, the people that are, actually talking to integrators and consultants day by day. I mean, we seriously take notes about, what kind of things are coming up, what kind of requests, no matter how odd they may sound, because you got to dig in a little bit deeper. And I think that, certainly, and this goes a little bit what Victoria was talking about with the customers knowing more what they want. Traditionally, as AV people, we've always been the kind of people that have been, well, I'm not sure if we can do that, but let's give it a shot. Let's try something. Let's at least go down that path. And like I said, we're very careful in taking down notes. And in fact, a lot of not to get too far off track, but a lot of our firmware changes that we've made in the last year to one of our popular products, our ceiling array, have actually been to bring specific request functionality from our integrators. So yeah, we're actively listening.
Yeah, Victoria, Kevin, I'm interested to hear what you guys are hearing in terms of end user customer demands and expectations and how you guys are working to meet those.
I want to comment on what Victoria said, and I agree 1,000%. The interface between the architects and the customers team about what they're trying to accomplish in a new facility or with a new system, it's really important. And Victoria, we've been saying the same thing, like, get us in earlier, please. So we're not dealing with, walls that are too shallow or acoustic issues or whatever. So, so Steph, what's actually the question is what are we seeing from the end user side to what are they asking for, kind of thing?
Yeah, and kind of two different questions. What are they asking for, and how have their needs and expectations evolved recently, and what are you guys doing to meet those demands?
I'll just, Victoria, if it's okay, I'll go just real quick on that. Is one thing that's worth, I guess, mentioning is with the proliferation of cloud solutions, a lot of our customers are now doing global type access to their content. Now, that's not unusual, but that was only for like the larger networks and the people that had more money, let's say, where they were like, yeah, well, we're doing the Olympics, so we're doing this, and we're in Japan, we're here, we're there. But now, pretty much across the board, people want to be able to. The COVID remote scenario triggered a lot of people going, well, wait a minute. If I could work from home and I could do all these things, or I could work from wherever, hotel, whatever, how can we expand upon that? So we're seeing that for sure, that and with a cloud platform, and and a big trend or a big requirement there is being able to communicate properly to the IT folks within our customers, because generally speaking, over the years, those guys are like, well, yeah, we're not worried about those types of systems. So, and that's changed. That's definitely changed. So, even from our own standpoint, we have our own people that are trained on that we build the networks now, and we program the switches. But regardless, that all has to get run through and approved by a security team on the customer side. So, I would just say that one thing I've noticed is the trend or the movement towards a greater access to their content and to the actual operational part of it. Again, COVID preventing people from going into a control room. Well, so what? If I can control the system from my house, my apartment, my whatever, and all we got to worry about is one or two people or three, we don't have the talent coming in with one as production assistant. So that's a big thing. That's become standard now. That's it. Like you don't even question that. You design a new facility, you got to make sure you're creating a network environment that allows for that kind of remote control as well. So remote access to content and remote control are very big.
Yeah, I agree on that for sure. And to expand on that, when you mentioned, we're dealing more and more with the IT people, there are more and more spaces, especially in corporate environments, where AV is now mission critical. It used to be, you had a projector in the room. If it went down, it was like, okay, let's get out the old paper and pen and whiteboard or whatever. But now it's like these rooms interconnect, multiple locations, they interconnect hybrid users, and it's mission critical. So we have to have SLAs, we have to have reliability, high availability, failover, all of those things, to make sure that these rooms are up and running and don't fail at critical times. So I think that's another big shift is AV is, mission critical in more and more spaces, not just, control rooms and other broadcasts and other places where it always was.
That's a great point. Yep. Totally agree. Yep.
So, what are some of the biggest challenges that Pro AV professionals are then facing right now? And I'm going to frame that question also toward Mark. How are you, as at Audio Technica, as a manufacturer, how are you helping address those challenges for those professionals?
A lot of the challenges that are being faced right now actually tie in with what we've all been talking about already, and a lot of that, like Kevin was talking about, if people are able to go and control things from their apartment or from their house or wherever. But I'm also finding too that we've got a lot of, like, during commissioning of a system, which my team sits in on that quite often. There's people from all over the place. They've got a programmer who's in this state, and the camera guys are in another state, and we're somewhere else completely. And I think that, trying to make it so it's not just some great big barrier. It's like, well, no, you have to have 5 different software running, and then you've got to open this up and that up and the other thing. So, we're really trying to streamline that so that, when we all get together on a call, we can solve a problem quickly. Get that up and running and reliable and ready to roll. So that's one of the big challenges I see right now as the interoperability gets more complicated.
I would absolutely. That's like, SDI became a standard, and pretty much you knew if you plugged in take the camera, plug it into the switcher or the router or the DA, whatever it was hitting next, it was going to work. I mean, if there was a problem, it could have been the BNC connector, or it could have been, oh, you forgot to turn the power on, whatever, something simple and stupid, right? That's not the case anymore. There are some of our customers are opting to go for a more of a end-to-end solution with us. You can't really do it, but they're skewing towards trying to get like one manufacturer, because the more people you introduce to the integrated system, the odds of there being an interop issue increase. Now they get solved, but I would agree with Mark. It's like we've found that, like on our side, like the amount of time to commission a system, test it all out 100%, make sure it's all working, that seems to be, it's increasing. In some cases it goes very fast. In some cases it's not so fast, but it's a different type of of procedure now than what we had done for years. I would add to this that I think on the end user side, the customers they're seeing some nice whiz bang things that I can have 8K video or let's say 4K. Okay, fine, and we can have immersive audio and all this great stuff. Making the case to your finance people, your CFO, like, why should we go there? Why should we do that? I think that's getting a little more challenging for the end users. I mean, you could show something and say, look how cool our competitor looks on camera and how great they sound, and that's impressive, right? But you're sitting in those meetings and people are talking about spending a lot of money for an upgrade, and it's like, what am I really getting for this? If that seems to be a little bit more challenging these days, is how we're helping our customers make that case a bit, so that's something worth mentioning, I guess.
So we had a couple of questions come in from our audience. The first one is from James. And Victoria, this was in response to what you said earlier when you said that, AV is being brought in earlier with the architect. So James asks, what are the most effective ways you've influenced architects to call the AV consultants?
I mean, there's a couple different ways. So one way that the CTI tries to make ourselves available to architects is we offer an AIA lunch and learn. So architects have to get these continuing credits, and they have to have someone come in, give them a presentation, and then they get credits. And so as a provider of those credits, we can reach out to any architect and say, hey, can we get on your schedule? Do you have like these regular lunch and learns? So that's one thing that we do. And then, we have specific marketing language, specific, images and things, and, marketing campaigns that target architects. And we've had success with that.
Another question that came in from the audience, this one is from John. Do you guys see any application for the use of AI in the video and audio processing area, as for like beamforming mics, speakers, and voice or facial recognition?
Well, certainly, for beamforming mics, I'm talking through beamforming mic right now. I mean, there's a certain, I hesitate to call it AI, but there's certainly a lot of algorithms going on in there, things that we've actually, recorded samples of things so that it doesn't confuse the mic to include that in the algorithms. But I think that, overall, as far as transducer technology comes from microphone side of it, it's pretty mature technology. Even beamforming mics are pretty mature. It's what happens after that, which I think is what the question there applies to, and where it can get really exciting, is what can you do with AI? I think one of the key things that we're starting to see more of, I've seen other manufacturers start to incorporate machine learning in noise cancellation, because it's easy to get rid of a noise like a fan or something like that. It's easy to EQ things so that a room sounds the way it's supposed to, but random noise that come out that show up that aren't voices, isn't actually the person speaking. That's where having that AI and having that machine learning can really clean things up. I think we're seeing a lot of that, starting out now, like I said, in a bunch of manufacturers, but I think that's really, from an audio processing side of things, where things are going.
And then final question. They're very active in the audience right now. This one's from Scott. He says, with AV being considered mission critical now in a lot of spaces, and the amount of work that needs to be done in low or no dust environments, are the construction schedules accounting for that time better? That's a really good question, actually.
I would say that they're not accounting for it.
Awesome.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, it's as Victoria, like we actively communicate with the typical architects that are usually involved with like the media type projects, but not always, right? So I would say the answer is I don't think that they are accounting for that properly. I think there's still a bit of like, well, it's just a TV and a camera, right? So what's the big deal? Like, just go hang it, and it's just a wire. What's the big deal?
Yeah.
And you can throw into that mix too, with this, the scalability and connectivity, all these fancy words or whatever, common words that imply a fancy solution. You have things like having to coordinate with an internet service provider, right? A Verizon or a Comcast, whoever it is, and that's a piece too that's not necessarily easy to do. I've seen them, or we have seen those kinds of folks start to develop their own division that can communicate more efficiently with folks like us, or Victoria's company, or Mark's company. Like, hey, well, this is what we need to do, and we need to really go through this and figure out what the QoS is, and and what's your firewall. That's another big part of this. That we're working with a customer right now that wants to connect together 3 different states and studios in 3 different states. And when I brought that up on the call, they were kind of like, oh, well, that's this person, and that person isn't normally here. And I'm like, well, we're going to have to fix that one. So I think they're not accounting properly for the amount of time that is needed to really get all the benefits of the current technology that's out there right now. Definitely could use a little bit more time. They never want to hear that, but it's that upfront planning and all of that time that really does need to go in properly up front. Everybody saves so many headaches and cost overruns when you take the time up front to plan it properly. So, I mean, it's kind of common sense, but a lot of people, once they get the project green lit, they just want to get moving, and where's those TVs hanging on the wall? Let's go. It's like, yeah, there's more that we have to talk about. So,
yeah.
I think, especially in new construction, this goes back to what we've already hammered quite a few times. It's just how early we're brought into into a project, because when it starts off, it's this well orchestrated Gantt chart of when everybody's going to do their thing. But by the time we get there, because we're the last ones at the end, it's really nothing more than a well orchestrated train wreck, because we're kind of forced to do, all right, you've got 15 minutes here, or 2 hours there. Be involved earlier in a project, I think, can help us get more towards that. But, when we're called in, hey, certificate of occupancy is in 10 days and we need this up and running, you've got to figure out how to make it happen.
Right. Yeah, we try to avoid the triage approach to the to these projects, but sometimes it's unavoidable,
Exactly. So, looking forward, what do each of you think are going to be the most critical factors driving innovation and success in the Pro AV industry over, let's say, the next year? Sorry, that's like a really hard one. You can think for a second.
That is a tough one.
I love to just throw a tough question at you guys and be like, okay, give me an answer immediately.
I think one of the exciting things, obviously is AI. I think we're just on the precipice, and a lot of products that we have now, it's more automation really than true AI. And there's some really cool stuff with beamforming mics, with tracking cameras, and I'm just excited to see where that's going to be in 12 months, because the innovation, once we really have AI and it starts taking off, it's going to be exponential, what it can do and what it's going to do in our spaces, and allow for what users, like the previous session, they were saying, bring your own intelligence to the meeting. For me, I think in the next year, that's we're sick of talking about it now and it feels slow, but as soon as it's going to be exponential the way that it takes off and impacts our lives.
And I think from a systems integration and consulting and design standpoint, we've brought on board our own software designers and people that can interface with the architects by creating our own renderings, and being able to bridge over a little bit more and close the gap between the other different disciplines that need to be successful in these projects. So for us, it's we have software development on our team now, definitely network engineers, and then network engineers that are savvy in audio and video protocols, because those are a little bit different things there, right? So yeah, I mean, from the design and build out perspective, we've had to grow our own team, and I think that at least not everybody, but a lot of our customers, it's not like it was like, I started in this business a long time ago, if unfortunately or fortunately, but when I started, like, I was in a room with 6 or 8 other engineers that had years of experience. They knew what they wanted, and they could provide the direction, and they'd already been through the fact gathering with their executives to say, what are we trying to do here? This is what we're trying to do. Okay. And then we would come in and be able to basically follow the bouncing ball and execute. And I see that as something that's changing on the end user side, where those types of folks aren't around as much, and they're really relying more on people like Victoria's company, my company, to Mark, for Audio Technica, whoever. Like, they're relying on us to be able to fill that space in that they used to provide. And what's, I don't want to say left behind, but what we need them for sure is the IT part of it, because so much of this runs on switches and gets into firewall rule settings and things that, that's a big shift to me. Like, in the last few years, is that we're absorbing more of the heavy lifting to get them across the finish line, and there's less on the end user side, at least from what I see anyway.
Yeah, I'd say, like like Kevin said, it's getting much more complicated. And what we have been focused on, and what we are continuing to increase our focus on, is that interoperability. Because so Audio Technica, we could make everything possible in the chain, in the complete chain, if we wanted to, and people would buy that. But more often than not, they want a feature from this and a feature from that, which is very, very common in the United States anyway, to have this custom bespoke kind of system. And being able to integrate with those, to look outside of my box and into somebody else's box, and understand how we can bring that data together, is something that we've really focused on. And taking that data, and to me, kind of an important thing is the correlation of that data. Because by taking data from cameras and camera tracking kind of things, and AI, face recognition, and taking things from beamforming microphones and the angles of where sound's coming from, I think bringing that all that information somewhere and correlating it can really make all of these features stronger than they are now.
So we just have a couple minutes left here. So as we're winding down, I wanted to go around and just ask each of you to give just a few final thoughts on, the state of the Pro AV industry right now. And Mark, when I call on, I would like you to go first, and I'd love an update on what you guys have going on at Audio Technica.
Well, we have a lot going. There's always a lot going on here. Too much for me sometimes. But I think that as we've kind of touched on before, and it was mentioned about COVID. I think Kevin mentioned it. Is COVID really kind of opened everybody's eyes up to what some of the potentials are? Everybody was used to meeting in a room. 15 years ago, you go into a room in a meeting, and most everybody's in that room, and you've got 1 or 2 people who are remote or whatever. You don't really care about it. It's like, whatever, I can hear it, I can see it. But that's not the case anymore, not even close. So really, COVID, among many other things, obviously, kind of really has forced our hand much further into the future than we would have been. And so we in a lot of cases, we're doing a lot of catch up there to try to keep up with that. But it's exciting, because we're starting to see things that we really didn't think was possible 10 years ago. Now it's like, well, that's a request I'm getting every day. As far as how we're looking forward, how Audio Technica is looking forward, while, like I said, transducers themselves are a fairly mature technology, but what you can do with that information when you capture it is something else entirely. And how we process it in our beamforming mics, how we are handling wireless microphones, and again, maintaining that interoperability with all these other ones. That's really where our focus is. I guess integration would be the one word to sum that up.
Yeah. Kevin, what about you? Any final thoughts?
Well, I mean, I mean, I've been through the evolution of component analog video, composite video, serial digital video, SD to HD, so on and so on and so on. And I think we're really, the AV world is at a this is a really exciting time, and I think it's going to continue to grow and expand because of this development of interoperability between the different manufacturers. And as AI takes a more of a foothold, I think you're going to see a lot more software solutions that can give the customer, what the end user, like what they're looking for. They're kind of have like a brand new canvas that they can just paint and say, well, I want to do this, or I want to do that, I want to do this, I want to do that, and this is an exciting time. I think there's a lot of solutions out there, and yeah, I mean, it's a very cool time to be doing this stuff.
Victoria, what about you?
Yeah, just to echo what Mark and Kevin were saying, I mean, it's, COVID was definitely a catalyst for innovation and really just catapulted our industry. I had been trying to sell video conferencing for 20 years, and then all of a sudden everybody wants it, They're coming to me now. And so, yeah, I think it's a great time to be in the industry. I think it's, I think we're finally poised and ready to really take the bull by the horns and kind of bring these solutions to our clients in unique ways and bespoke the solutions for them, like Mark had said. It's definitely a great time to be in ProAV.
Awesome. Well, the actual last question I'm going to ask each of you is, where can people find you online if they would like to contact you after this? And where can people reach out to your companies? Mark, you want to start us off?
Oh, yeah, certainly. You can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Mark Donovan, Donovan, simple spelling. You can also come to the company's website, which is www.audio-technica. I can move my head out of the way, you can actually see that, audio-technica.com, and certainly reach out and see what our products are, and send an email to my applications team.
Awesome. Kevin?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Kevin Henneman. And our company is also on LinkedIn, KMH Integration, and our website is www.kmh-integration.com. Those are probably the best ways to get a hold of us.
Perfect. Victoria?
You can find me on LinkedIn as well, Victoria Ferrari, and the company is CTI, and our website's just cti.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining me, and big thank you to Mark and, of course, to Audio Technica for sponsoring this panel. It's been great talking to you guys.
Cool.
Same here. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. All right, everyone. And for our next session of the day, we are going to throw it to Avixa for the state of ProAV, insights from Avixa's industry outlook and trends analysis.
Hello, this is Sean Wargo from Avixa. Happy to join you here for Launch Week 10. Always a privilege and an honor to be able to speak on behalf of Avixa for these events. Have a lot of great research to share with you today from Avixa's portfolio of market intelligence. As you can see from my title slide here, we're going to do a little bit of a state of the Pro AV industry. We're calling this riding out the saddle. So I think many of you who are watching the market close, may have known that the last couple of years have been a bit of fits and starts. 2024 is certainly no exception to that, where we seem to be in a bit of a trough in terms of growth rates, having recovered very strongly from pandemic, and are watching and looking for kind of new drivers of growth as we go forward. And of course, there's always contextual challenges to consider right now, with interest rates being still fairly high. You have inflation still out there a little bit. And then in these periods of uncertainty with geopolitics and that sort of thing, there's a bit of hedging going on in the market. So we'll talk about that today from the lens of all things market intelligence. These are the things I'd like to cover. So when we set up the story of the overall industry, always good to start with the macroeconomic context. We have a staff economist who helps us keep an eye on macro to know how it is then impacting Pro AV. We're going to look at a little data from the voice of the customer, voice of channel. So customer in this case being our end user buyers. We We watch, follow their kind of pulse check on a quarterly basis to see what are the latest things that they're focusing their investments on and their overall sentiment. Voice of channel, of course, is integrators and installers and how their business outlook is shaping up, how their actuals are shaping up month to month. That then drives the industry outlook. So we'll go deep in there to look at our latest industry outlook trends analysis report published in June of this year, which takes a look at all things spending for ProAV. And of course, we'll wrap up as we go. So where I want to start is just a little bit of, I'll tell you what I'm going to tell you and then tell you again, essentially, just kind of the highlights of what's going on out there. Based on the title, you can imagine or guess that things are a bit uncertain as we look at the overall macro context as I led in with. We'll talk a little bit about how those are impacting overall ProAV. But what I would say is, generally speaking, on the corporate enterprise side, a bit of what may be called a hedge effect. Wait and see how things play out for the rest of the year. Watch and wait for the kind of true impacts of lower interest rates to take a hold on spending outlook as we go forward. So we'll kind of look at how that shapes up from a growth perspective. As we look globally, ProAV for us, and Avixa, we are an international trade association, so we do watch the markets across the globe. The real star of the show these days is India from a growth perspective. Largest economies, China, US, still big drivers of growth. But as we look at kind of macroeconomics and what's happening on a global basis, India is really where it's at from a growth perspective, even as China will still see some large, if not as large growth as it's seen in the past. ProAV benefits from macroeconomic cycles and, of course, feels the pain when there are contraction or headwinds to deal with. In this case, ProAV certainly is benefiting from continual examination of office space. How is the work from home trend kind of shaping up? How are companies coming back? How are they using their space? The experience economy is a big driver for ProAV. That's been a story that even predates the pandemic. So that's still out there as a contributor. And then, of course, we have fundamental technologies like AI or other innovations that act as accelerators or sometimes disruptors to the industry. So those are things to, of course, consider, but ProAV is benefiting from a lot of that. The challenges for the market, as I'll talk about today, really have shifted. We were saying that supply chain issues were a big issue for ProAV, just couldn't get the products to be able to complete projects out there. A lot of that has resolved in the market. Of course, there's going to be lingering effects of that in pockets. But what we've really returned to, as you'll see from the data, less about supply chain, more about labor constraints. So finding the people needed to do the work is a challenge in what are low unemployment markets out there across a lot of the developed world. And so especially what's unique now is not even so much just at the most skilled level, but across the spectrum. So that's making it hard to even find and skill up the workforce that you need. Of course, adjacent markets where there's more weaknesses does help us find some potential talent. So we'll talk about that. So here's a way to look at things. We had our economist apply his mathematics to develop a sine curve that essentially kind of shows you the variability that has been, gosh, everything, and certainly including ProAV over the last several years. Big disruption with pandemic, downward trends, lower spending. We recovered from that, but there's been oscillations as we go forward. We do think that's stabilizing to some degree. So we're now kind of in this leveling out phase. This is good because what it means is that we're expecting to see more uniformity across the market in terms of benefactors from growth trends. Whenever there's an increase in end user plans, we will see that kind of percolate through integration all the way down to manufacturing. That hadn't been the case over the last few years, where integrators may have been benefiting a little bit more from recovery as projects came back, but manufacturers, because of oversupply in the channel, there was less benefit down. So that seems to be evening out as supply chain issues and other things also even out. Of course, variation now comes from maybe more economic factors like interest rates and other considerations, but we do think that a lot of the wild oscillations that we've seen in the past are stabilizing more and more. So the next thing we always look at is GDP. We as an industry are, gosh, a part of every fundamental part of an economy, every underlying industry, whether it's hospitality, transportation, events, government, education. And so we need to watch GDP as an indicator of how things are doing. In this case, what we're seeing is data that shows fairly good outlooks in 23, 24, a little bit of slowdown as we go into 24, 25, though we think that some other things start to help us. But whether you're talking about the Americas, 1 to 2% growth there, 1.7, 2.4 over this year. The EMEA region, a little more challenged. We see actually some true recessions in places like Germany, though that is getting better, and 25 looks even better still. APAC, as we kind of teased out with the notion that India is the star of growth. China's been a challenge, has had a challenge over the last year or two, and so they're seeing less economic growth than they have in the past. That's a big contributor to total ProAV, since we know as a developing market, there's a lot of project work there. That being said, 4% to 4.5% growth in Asia and in China in particular still would be the envy of the rest of the world, where we're seeing 2-3% growth. So a great economy from a contributing perspective to ProAV. The thing that we've been watching over the last several years is the risk of recession. There had been talk about that as we even came out of the pandemic, that with interest rates, with inflation running hot, that perhaps in the US, for example, the Fed might overcompensate. That would increase our risk of recession as we went through the last few years. This data shows that according to an economist survey, the perceived risk, or the percent of economists who think there is a recession possible in the near future over the next 12 months, has really cooled a lot. This would suggest, as with other data out there, that the Fed in the US certainly has stuck the landing, so to speak, with interest rates, though we'll continue to watch as we go forward. But for now, risk of recession seems light. From there, it's all about experience economy. We talked about this a lot, and you go back even pre-pandemic, the parts of our economy that are, say, experiential, whether that's stadiums or venues, house of worship, a whole bunch of different parts of our economy kind of tied up into this. The notion is that industries are now competing for eyeballs. They have to up their game in terms of getting people to come to any particular event, whether it's a concert or a game, etc. The ticket prices have gone up accordingly, and it almost creates a bit of an arms race, you could call it, to outcompete each other for experience. The benefits, of course, ProAV, as we are an intrinsic part of those experiences. So that top line experience economy notion really is our sweet spot. The good news is it's a long-term trend, even as we see a little bit of oscillation as we go through periods where consumers might pull back a little bit, and so there's less money to work with. But overall, big driver of growth for us as an industry. As I mentioned before, the challenges, though, in the market are a bit shifting. So this squiggle graph, you could call it, has a lot of different issues that we watch month over month. I want you to focus in on one particular color here, the red, that starts very high up in the graph on the left, and then really starts to join the mass of issues as we look back even into 23 and certainly into 24 now, where this data as of August is showing that supply chain challenges are less common, still there in the mix, but at below 10% of our integrator installers reporting that as a critical current challenge for them. That's a dramatic improvement over where we were in 22 and even before that. You could expect that probably the high water mark for this was actually sometime even in 21 or earlier in 22. But instead, if you look, kind of squint hard, look at the graph and find the purple line there, that is hiring and retention. So in the latest month, that was the top issue, even if it's not broken away from the pack and become the primary challenge for businesses. One to watch, though. We know as we ask over a longer period of time, what is your most significant challenge that you'll face this year? Hiring and retention really does start to break away then as a challenge for our businesses, for integrator installers, as they look to meet the demands of project work. One of the ways that that's playing itself out is in wages. Avixa does a salary survey among AV professionals early on in the year. We make that available through a salary dashboard and a report about state of employment in our industry. If you look at this, it's showing across different economy types, the US and then non-US high GDP, non-US low GDP. You'll see a pronounced increase in the average, salary paid to AV professionals over the years. Really peaked in 2022, but held as a very big growth in 2023, especially for non-US low GDP. What does this mean? Labor is more expensive for our ProAV integrator installer communities, for embedded professionals, all that sort of stuff. So it's something that has to be factored into the cost equation as companies look to build their rate cards, plan for margin, all that sort of stuff. So a contributing challenge to our industry. One way that we get through that type of challenge is looking for labor in adjacent markets. What we asked our sample of AV professionals this year is, how did you get your start in ProAV? How'd you come in? You would expect, not surprising, that student is the number one response. 38% of our professionals out of the 5,000 said they came in just right out of school. They were perhaps part of an AV club, or doing theater, or a frustrated artist or actor or musician, something like that, and got their kind of start in ProAV that way. So it's a testament that we tend to home grow our talent as they come out of school looking for, what do I do now? So a good story there for the kind of genesis of our professional base. From there, IT next on the list, also not too much of a surprise given the kind of overlap that we see increasingly between AV and IT, and that many AV is often managed within IT departments. So not a surprise there, as there's a bit of a bridging that happens. From there, we get to the experience parts of the economy, and where we at Avixa are watching very closely, and that is with broadcasts and live events. So that kind of event-based industry, broadcast more on the streaming side, of course, but a real kind of linkage or synergy between these two things. The need to create content, capture it, optimize it, distribute it out, is a skill set that we see more and more in our industry. And it'll be interesting to watch this data through time as we see how some of those professionals migrate over. I would point to broadcast and live events, broadcast even more significantly so, as a place for talent. We're seeing a lot of people come over as those two markets, AV and broadcast, kind of overlap more, and as more and more integrator installers and related AV and companies start to stand up this capability. So one to watch. I will say other does show up high on the list here. Other, unfortunately, is mostly other. So when you really start to look within this segment, it shows that there are a lot of different paths into the industry, and there's no clear theme. It's adjacent industries. They may have gotten a start in retail or hospitality or logistics or telecom and kind of find their way into the industry, perhaps because they had a sales role or because they were managing technology for their company. All that is in the mix here. So let's turn our lens now to a different set of data, and this is actually end user sentiment and expectation. What we ask every single quarter is, what is your plans? How do you expect your capital improvement project spending to change year over year? And this is the percent increase broken out by all the countries that we survey. One thing the data doesn't quite show is through time, we're noticing the overall capital improvement budget expectations have been kind of low or declining a little bit in 2024. And you see from this slide where that is the most pronounced. US on the farthest right here out of the 10 countries under study, where we actually, for one of the first times, are seeing more people saying they plan to spend about the same or less on capital improvement projects for Q4 versus the same period last year. So this points again to that kind of trough effect, saddle effect, or a slight downward inflection point in our market. More stronger markets, India, as noted, Mexico, Brazil, so some of our LATAM countries where we do tend to see higher scores in general. France, coming out of the Olympics, there was perhaps a little bit less spending growth than in the past, but strong as well. China more in the middle, and then you get over to Germany where more noted impacts of recession. US is interesting to see it on this far right, certainly not among these one of the weaker economies, but I think it's a result of just some macroeconomic realities that the US market is facing. We also look at this by vertical market and just kind of show you where the planned spending is a little bit higher than others. Corporate, is not surprising to see on the farthest left that there's planned budget increases there. Though I think as we look at that market, you'll see in a moment from some of our other industry data, that spending composition may be a bit more on the kind of scale and volume side than it is on the margin side. That is kitting lots of different conferencing rooms and that sort of thing. The one that surprised me the most is to see venues and entertainment far on the left here at 33% planning increase year over year. This could be seasonal. We're watching it, knowing that we see experience economy as a big driver of our industry. Seeing venues and events would suggest maybe that's slowing down, but I think that may just reflect a little bit of the seasonality and kind of concerts and other events around the world. We'll watch that as we go forward. The counterpoint to that is hospitality, more on the left side, where there's a bit of experience in there. There had been increase in travel, even if more domestic, but to see that coming in high suggests that there is some spending as hospitality venues, hotels, resorts, even on the conferencing side, start to invest a bit more in their facilities. The other way I like to look at this is a lot on this graph, but if you take some time to kind of stare at it, what you start to see is some surprising things when you break out spaces that companies are investing in for ProAV upgrades and the vertical markets that they come from as a buyer. Some things make sense, like seeing retail sales floors for retail on the top is expected. Same thing with boardrooms, group collaboration on corporate, or AV production in venues, large group rezo in government, education classrooms, healthcare, patient exam procedure rooms. But across each, you'll find some perhaps more surprising notes. For example, corporate investing in control rooms and AV production rooms for broadcasts, to us highlights this opportunity for enterprise broadcast systems, which a control room could be a part of as they look to stand up capabilities to manage their content. Venues and events also have control rooms at the top. That is also perhaps content production kind of capability, security surveillance, but you also see some collaboration technology there as a venue might invest in its headquarters location for boardrooms and classrooms, etc. Some of the others too, AV production rooms for broadcast on retail is also somewhat surprising. Tells us that perhaps retail organizations are looking for ways to capture content and distribute it out to their customer, their consumer base. So these are opportunity areas for those clever in ProAV who are looking kind of for extension on service sets as they talk to some of their core customer bases. So one of those data points that's good to spend some time to look at on a quarterly basis. So we'll spend the rest of the time kind of looking at how does that translate into the outlook for our markets. This is the big headliner that we often refer to, the large and growing size of the ProAV market. As we always say, this is a big number because we include lots of things. So $325 billion seems like a lot for the average small integrator in, let's say, Toronto, Canada. But the point is to highlight just how broad that opportunity is, and so you can look for segments where there's better growth. I'll get to that and show you how that's playing out in just a moment. Otherwise, where this is useful is to look at growth rates, both year over year and then long term. We've highlighted in red a couple of those notable callouts. So the ProAV industry in 2023, for example, grew about 6.9% globally. You can segment, of course, by country, but that gives you a little bit of the top line indicator. If you're doing better than that, then if your growth is higher than that, then you are benefiting in an outsized way from the trends. If you're below it, then you're kind of a little behind the areas of strong growth in the industry. Same thing goes for the long-term compound annual growth rate of 5.35%. That's another way to peg your business and say, hey, are we doing it better than the industry at large? Are we kind of gaining share, a bigger part, capturing a bigger part of the overall revenues, or are we falling behind, and do we need to therefore adapt to that? All those things are questions to ask. Otherwise, lots goes on into this. Things like the experience economy, AI, and its impacts all are part of that large figure for us as an industry. This is that year-over-year story. Also a lot to digest on these slides as well, but what you're getting a feel for is how we've changed that saddle effect and how we've adjusted our data from year to year. We had originally forecast, for example, that 2023 was going to grow at around 7.6 or 7%, and we pulled back on that as we noted some weakness in some key areas of ProAV that I'll kind of call out for it. But a lot of it is bellwether, which is what's been a bit challenging for our market as we come out of that pandemic recovery period. We also pulled back on the 2024 growth rate. That was about 6.5. We're down now to about 6.1. And what we were showing at the time is that that starts to improve again in 2025. So you see the saddle effect already here, 24 being a theoretical low point. As more data comes in, we will potentially refine this. I would expect, based upon the late move on interest rates in 2024, that 24 might come in a little bit lighter than we originally expected as well. And 25 then in turn might look a little better, depending on the timing of how those interest rates affect us. But you can see that saddle here. Good news is things start to improve even more as we look at 25 and beyond. So this is how it breaks out in terms of spending areas. As you look at your business, this is how we kind of look at the various verticals, the buyers of ProAV solutions and technology, the amount of spending coming from those particular segments, and the corresponding growth rates. So as you look at your business as an integrator or manufacturer or distributor, and you start to look at size, yes, so percent of contribution to your overall business, but perhaps even more so, the growth rates. Corporate, media and entertainment, venues, the big three for our ProAV. Education, not too far behind that as kind of the bellwethers. You could say corporate and education, maybe government as well, or where a lot of our ProAV installer integrators are focused as a business. But we see perhaps better growth in things like media and entertainment, energy utility, even retail is higher than the industry average of 5.35. So this is where you start to look at mix of customer and say, are we in those places where there's a bit more growth, as perhaps some of the core segments like corporate education show a little bit lower growth, lower than industry average. So it comes down to mix. Be looking for those places where you can expand and develop pipeline into perhaps some parts of market that are doing a little bit better from a growth perspective. One way to do that is to look at your solution areas. So here again, we see the kind of challenge in the market right now with some of the bellwether category solutions like conference and collaboration, your boardrooms, your huddle spaces, auditoriums, that sort of stuff, learning as well. Those are the big two from a solution area perspective, but they are a bit more challenged right now in terms of overall revenue growth. I will tell you a lot of that comes down to price points of product. In our market, as is often the case for technology, you see deflation in pricing. As when it gets to products, you'll see that even more pronounced. But the mix underneath, so in conferencing, a lot more scale, investing in lots of smaller spaces instead of larger, higher end kind of flagship types of spaces. That's pulling down that growth expectation. Learning too went through a rapid wave of investment right after pandemic and is a little bit more metered in their approach. So their growth rate is slower. On the other hand, digital signage, broadcast AV, so that capability of capturing content and distributing it out, performance entertainment, your fixed install entertainment solutions, live events, these are areas that we've seen and expect to see them grow faster than the industry average. Signage has some intrinsic challenges with display prices coming down that pull down revenue opportunity a little bit, but there again, it can be a little bit more about scalability, more options, a price point conducive to installing signage in more places. So here again, it's about what types of solutions are you offering as a business, where is there a little bit more growth, even if, say, a large chunk of revenue comes from bellwether kind of core parts of the market, growth is likely to come from some of these adjacent areas. The story is also comes through on the product side. So this is what we're selling as an industry. Certain solutions, bundle everything together. These are the fundamental products. We'd always been saying that back-end systems, content management hardware, on the services side, there's some cloud-based revenue in there, that those were big contributors to our industry. That's not true for everyone, but it's become an increasing part of the mix, meaning when you're doing a conference and collaboration solution, more and more, you're also managing the back-end systems, the media servers, the network attached storage, the infrastructure in terms of routers and cabling, a bunch of things kind of coming in here and also in the infrastructure number down the ranking a little bit. Where I'd point to some fundamental weakness would be under video displays. That's expected to be a good growth rate, but price points have come down a lot there as there's actually oversupply in the kind of video display market. But ultimately, that can be viewed as somewhat good news for our industry, our integrated installers, who now have a price point that may be conducive to a bit more coverage, more options. It opens up some other customer opportunities as those products come down, and creates a room in the balance sheet towards perhaps services and audio and some other product categories. Otherwise, the notable here is standalone software, a catch-all category, we'll admit, that includes content management hardware, business tool sets, AI types of product sets can come in here, product management, a whole bunch of project management, a whole bunch of different things. 10.9% growth rate in standalone software, certainly the biggest part. As we know, software has become a bigger and bigger part of the story for us. So I'm going to build this slide real quick, because what I want to focus on here, these are 4 categories within ProAV that as you start to look at that 325 and boil it down to segments, to look for growth, look for strength, look for opportunity. There's kind of 4 key ones as we look at our market. Core control, brands like Crestron, Amex, Extron, Kramer. Traditional AV, some of the same companies, but a bit broader, more solutions, more markets, more product categories. IT AV overlap would be your back-end systems, media servers, network attached, cloud services, etc. And then event tech on the far right side. These are companies and brands focused a little bit more on all things events and entertainment. Focus in on the 2023 and 2024 growth lines, and you'll see a story come out right away. Core control and traditional AV, much lower growth. In fact, a very challenging growth story in 23 for traditional AV, juxtaposed against IT AV overlap and event tech. Same thing for 24 growth and the compounding of growth rates. So this once again shows you where in our industry we're seeing a little bit outsized opportunity based upon areas of focus. So a lot more story behind this. Certainly reach out to me if you have questions on it, because how you filter matters to where the opportunity is and what size of what we call SAM here, service addressable market, kind of your segment and how you exist within it. And you'll see that in the top line figures here too. So that kind of wraps up the IOTA side. I would just give quick note to, of course, as we do all these forecasts, you got to kind of keep an eye over to the overarching impactful trends and technologies. For a long time now, 20 plus 30 years, it's been a story of AV over IP, more and more content and solutions being utilized in the IP backbone within organizations. That's clearly a driving factor for ProAV. Linked to that is software and cloud migration, use of more software toolkits, AI being a part of that, cloud as a storage mechanism to be able to route content wherever needed and manage business. AI, of course, then another impactor there as it becomes more widely used as a tool set within places like security surveillance, command and control, conferencing, certainly as teams and other platforms start to incorporate that capability. And then last but not least, on the overall experiential economy side, extended reality and that kind of use of tech to go beyond just the in-person, add on to it in an augmented fashion, and carry it online in some cases. That's been a part of the fabric of our industry. So wrapping up today, I think we started with the notion of the saddle, and that is certainly where we are. 2024, a little bit lower growth. We may pull back on that a little further as we get kind of final data in for 2024, but I think it reflects that larger context of macroeconomics, headwinds, yes, interest rates, those sorts of things, hedging on part of corporate, geopolitical uncertainties, those kinds of things. But we do see that improving in the future. And we also see continued upside. And a lot of that comes from experiences. The consumer has shown a lot of resilience over the last several years and continues to. They're out, they're about, they're engaging in experiences across so many parts of our economy. And so that offers an opportunity for us. A part of our opportunity as an industry is continuing to look at adjacencies. So during the pandemic, that was relying hard, of course, on the investments needed in education and conferencing for hybrid and just being able to keep business running. Now it's things like broadcast AV, control, those sorts of places, and even security surveillance, where we start to see opportunity around our margins that offer opportunity for expansion for our business, that we think is somewhat of a ProAV story. Increasingly, as we look at the future, that overlap becomes important for us as an opportunity. Thanks so much for joining us. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at swargo@avixa.org. My colleagues' emails are also here on the economic side and then on our product side. But would love to have a conversation with you. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of launch week.
Hi, we're back.
We're back. And if you've made it this long, congratulations on your 2.5 CTSRUs you have earned for the day.
Yay! They will be emailed out to you within 10 business days, so within 2 weeks. And it's going to your email address that you registered for the event with.
Yep, and that will come from cts@theraveagency.com. But some of you have already reached out to me with any questions about that, and you can continue to do so. My email is steph@theraveagency.com if you just have any general questions, comments, concerns about getting your CTS credit.
Yes, Steph, this has been another fantastic launch week.
It has.
I had such a good time.
I did too. I'm really pleased with our panelists and speakers this time. All of them literally brought it.
Oh, Steph, that last panel you did just like popped off in the chat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it did. And I think that when I ask the panelists, I'm like, please bounce off of each other, like be fun. They do it and it's awesome. And the ones that are really conversational, where we do go off on tangents and I don't get to ask all of my planned questions, I feel like those are the ones that end up being the best. So
yes, I agree. We promised you all that we would play some blooper reel for you.
I was hoping they'd forget.
So this is your reward.
This is your
for
reward.
making it through. You can check out this cute little blooper reel before we wrap up.
Yep.
Welcome to Launch Week X. What?
10. I was fighting for my life. Trying not to laugh. I was. That's okay.
Woo. Take 2.
Okay. Whew. Okay.
Buckle up. No. Welcome
to Launch Week. I was doing it. So I was fighting for my life in my session. I'm trying not to laugh because Gary K's just crawling around.
Get it together.
Right.
I probably could have just kept going, but just go.
What do you mean?
Today's intro is brought to you by ChatGPT.
Not to laugh.
You were behind. He started doing the Darth Vader voice the whole time or something. He was reading something ChatGPT.
I see her mouth open and I start talking at the same time.
Do I have to do that?
I'm crying. Welcome
to Forget it. Welcome to Launch Week X.
Okay, I know what it sounds like to cry now.
So as you can see, I'm sure that you think that we're professionals at this and we can just do everything in one take because we're live now, but that's actually not the case.
No, I think we just enjoy each other's company too much.
We do. A lot of that meeting where we were just recording a few short promos in preparation for launch week was just like brain rot.
Yeah.
Conversation. Just us like making weird noises back and forth. So yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for coming today. And don't forget to save your spot for Launch Week 11 if you have enjoyed your experience this week at Launch Week 10. We hope you will join us. We're going to drop a link in the chat so you can go ahead, save the date, put it on your calendar. All we need is your name and email just so that we can send you a reminder when proper registration comes out. So yeah, thank you guys so much for coming.
Yes. And I just want to give one more thank you to our sponsors and partners, Audio Technica, Aver, Crestron, Matrox Video, Modern Atomics, Televic, TV1, and our partners, Avixa, Cedia, Edge, Digital Signage Federation, HETMA, Idea, Save, and Wave It. This week would not be possible out all of them. So thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for attending. Yay!
Yay! Congratulations to you guys for being part of this. So thank you. As always, we appreciate your continued support, and you are the reason that we do this. So thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you next time.
Bye.